October 24th, 2017 meeting of the Portland Planning and Sustainability Commission to order. Our agenda for this evening is items of interest from commissioners and a director's report, and then adoption of a consent agenda consisting of our minutes from October 10th. We will then have a work session on the transportation system plan. Following that, we have two public hearings. The first is on the 2035 Comprehensive Plan Map Refinement Project. That will begin at 5:50 time certain, which means not before that. And the second hearing is on the 2035 Comprehensive Plan Code Reconciliation Project, and that is time certain at 7:15. Are there any items of interest from commissioners? And I will note for the record that you only see 4 commissioners here at the moment. We have 2 more telephonically, so that achieves quorum. Any items of interest? Okay, I have a couple. As you know, it's my habit to keep the commission apprised of our traffic fatality stats as we work towards Vision Zero. Early in the year, we were actually running at less fatalities than last year, and we were starting to feel pretty good. I'm sorry to say that that trend is no longer holding. As of October 12th of this year, which is when I have the stats from, we had 33 fatalities compared to 32 last year at the same date. And I'm afraid that since the 12th, we have had 4 more, so our tally is now 37, and we're running ahead of last year in traffic fatalities, so we have lots of work still to do. The other...
Is your mic on? I'm not sure. Can people in the back hear okay?
People hear me? Yeah. Okay, I'll try and get closer to the mic. The other item I'd like to call the Commission's attention is we've had several discussions here about probably needing policy to couple investments in affordable housing with investments in transportation. And I'll just let people know that the mayor has called for a housing component to the big transportation ballot measure that TriMet is trying to pull together. Now, TriMet is saying that their charter doesn't allow them to collect money for housing, but at least we're having the policy discussion that we should be raising money for both at the same time. So I consider that an encouraging step. Okay. Eric, director's report.
Thank you, Chris. I'm here filling in for Susan Anderson, who couldn't be here tonight. I have 3 quick items to mention. First was just a reminder, I think there have been some emails and reports about this in the past, but we are currently recruiting to fill the Community Involvement Committee, the new CIC, and for those of you who are veterans of the comp plan process, we had a group called the CIC throughout the comp plan update process, and it was an oversight body, a citizen group who was giving oversight over the process of public involvement during that. And with the adoption of the new comp plan, we have implemented and codified an ongoing CIC fulfilling that role with oversight over our public involvement practices, and we currently are recruiting for that new committee. Applications are due by the 6th of November. And there is information on the BPS website about that process, so I would encourage folks to spread the word about that and interested parties to apply. Second item is staff have written and are in the process of filing an ordinance with City Council to delay the effective date of the 2035 comp plan a few months from January 2018 to May 23rd, 2018. And as you know, we submitted the local record for the comprehensive plan this year after the council's adoption last year. It had an effective date of January, designed to allow adequate time for the state to review the plan for consistency with state land use goals, and then process any objections that they received, which they did receive a number of objections and have been working through that. We expect a decision from the state before the end of this calendar year. And then there is the opportunity for objectors to further appeal that to the Land Conservation and Development Commission. And their first meeting after that, it will be in March 2018. And so to allow adequate time for the full commission to hear objections, we're suggesting a delay in that implementation date. It also avoids the awkward situation of having an unacknowledged plan in effect, which adds some procedural hoops to the development review process that we would rather not impose. So that's a quick update on that. That ordinance should be moving to council for their consideration next month.
Eric, can you just walk through what assuming the council agrees and the new effective date is May 23rd, what is it that becomes effective next May?
There were a couple components that have that effective date. The new plans, policies, and land use map are as well as the transportation system plan project list. The second layer is the new set of zoning designations and zoning map that was adopted last December by the council that would also have that same effective date.
And implementing code as well?
Yes, that includes the implementing new mixed-use codes,
Right.
all of that.
Okay.
The final thing, which is overlapping with what Chris just mentioned, is we did have a productive housing summit in Southwest Portland recently with a number of dignitaries present, including the mayor. We have been in discussion with TriMet and Metro and our other project partners around the idea of raising money for housing contemporaneously with the effort to raise money to build the Southwest Light Rail line. And that dialogue is continuing. The mayor made a statement there, which I think is supportive of the goals of the housing strategy that we've briefed you on. And so we'll keep you up to date in the future as that evolves.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Andres, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, consent agenda is adopted. Can we have staff up for the TSP, please?
Yeah. Chris, can you say who's on the phone?
Yes, Commissioner Houck and Commissioner Spivak are on the phone.
Okay, thank you. Hi, thank you. It's Courtney Duke from the Bureau of Transportation, and we are here. I'm here with Zeph Wagner and Peter Hurley and Don Russ from the Fire Bureau to finalize, hopefully, the Transportation System Plan Stage 3 update. You had a hearing with us about a month ago, I think, is when we were here last, and we have made some changes and recommendations in the packet that you got. We called it the decision matrix. And we made some changes based on your comments, as well as public testimony, as well as additional work internally. So that's all reflected on the sheet that you got earlier last week. And then again, there are some minor amendments today, I believe. And I apologize, I've been home with a sick kid all day today, so I'm getting back in the groove here. So hopefully I've got everything covered. But Peter and Zeph have been holding down the fort at the office. So the main items today are to look at that list that you've hopefully already looked at. And if there's anything you want to take off of that list to discuss, to do that at the beginning of the meeting. And I think Commissioner Smith, as the chair, will assist with that. I know that he wants to make sure that we talk about number 2, which is the letter to City Council, which we weren't expecting. Of course, we were expecting that. Of course, you're going to talk about that. And then number 15, which is the issue around 20th Avenue. Otherwise, at this point, those are the only things that we've heard of to pull. And so the process would be you would vote on that as a consent and then talk about those other 2 or 3 or 4, whichever ones you guys are pulling. And we are here to try to answer those questions about anything that you still have. And then we would continue to work with you on a letter and transmittal to City Council. And we would discuss that at the end of the meeting, exactly how we would do that and what the process would be and who we would work with. And then we would have that final discussion and vote. And we have about 45 minutes on the agenda. And just to follow up briefly on what Eric mentioned about the effective date of May 23rd, 2018, what that means for the TSP3 is that our final hearing and vote for our section that we're working on now, it needs to be after that date. So, you know, it's the Courtney Job Act of 2018 that I'll still have something to work on next year. So we do want to have a final vote today with you, but we aren't going to our final council vote until May. So just wanted to let you know. And similar to your question, what exactly does that mean of what's in effect and what's not in effect? Those are some things that we need to work on internally as well to make sure our staff is clear on everything between now and May as well. So we'll be working with our development review staff and others on that. So I think I'll turn it over to Chris to see if there's anything else people want to pull. Is that, I think, where we were at? Okay.
Okay, thank you, and for the record, I'll note that Commissioner Hauk has given up on his Skype connection, so we
Okay.
still have Commissioner Spivak with us telephonically,
And we still have a quorum then?
and we have 2 more commissioners here in the
Okay.
room, fortunately, so we have quorum.
All right.
And can continue. So colleagues, are there any other items you would like to highlight on the decision matrix to discuss? Jeff?
Yeah, sorry I didn't send word earlier, but I'd like to have a discussion about number 3.
Okay.
That's the regional policy, the change being proposed.
Okay.
Any others?
I would like to, can you hear me?
We can. Eli, thank you.
Okay. I see the addition of the interim targets that I requested before, and I guess I'd like to get a little bit more clarity about at what point these would be added in. It seems like there's a little bit of language in the recommendation here to agree with the need to have interim targets, but I'm a little unclear if the last version of this document had targets. And would this go into the TSP, or would this be something that becomes a staff project for somewhere down? Does it kick the can down the road? That's the question I'm wondering.
Okay, so I don't know if everyone could hear Commissioner Spivak's question related to the interim targets, which are mentioned in this slide, and we part of item 2, and the question is whether those are now part of this document or something to be developed later. I think the answer is something to be developed later, but we can discuss that further when we get to item 2. So what I have now is items 2, 3, and 15. Are there any others? Okay, so I'm going to suggest we hold item 2 for last, since it's part of the recommendation that we'll be voting on, and tackle items 2 and 3. So, I'm sorry, 3 and 15. So why don't we begin with number 3?
I'm sorry, could we begin with number 15 since we have a guest?
Okay,
Sorry.
we are nothing if not flexible tonight.
Okay, thanks. Our guest is here for number 15, so we'd appreciate it.
Okay, so I assume this is about emergency classifications first.
Correct.
Yeah, so as you know, there were concerns from community members about really the traffic, transit, and emergency response classifications. And it seemed like there were a lot of questions from you guys last time about speed bumps and speed cushions, what the secondary response network is for, what's that trade-off between neighborhood livability and emergency response, things like that. And we sent you some information about that, and some about 20th in particular with some photos, so that you have that in your packet. But we also thought it'd be helpful to hear directly from somebody working in the Portland Fire Bureau, because this really was a collaborative process between the 2 bureaus. And so getting that perspective we thought would be helpful. So Don Russ is here from Portland Fire and Rescue, and he just has a few points to make about the development of this and what it's all for.
So thank you. Yeah, I was approached about 6 months ago. I'm a special operations deputy chief for Portland Fire and Rescue. And I do review a lot of some of the road designs, active road designs, and how they affect our emergency response. And a couple engineers, Scott and Zeph, approached me about in their TSP and adding a classification, and they outlaid some reasons why we needed it. And historically, we had emergency response routes, and we weren't very flexible with them for many years. And then as Portland grew, we needed better right-of-way designs to improve these. And so they outlaid a map. It was kind of a draft of a map of some of the changes they're presenting and how the secondary emergency routes would be implemented into that map. And it was a nice trade-off. It was a good compromise. We made some concessions. There was concessions on the map on our major emergency routes, which would slow some areas down and allow them to create some better right-of-way designs for bikes and pedestrians. And on the same, and additionally, it created if we adopt the secondary emergency routes, but they outlaid some of the routes that were going to be changed into a secondary emergency route which were a little less restrictive for us. They would, we wouldn't be able to put the bumps on them, but they would still have the nice trade-off of the speed cushions. And just a few notes on the speed cushions. I present these to officers and engineers who drive the apparatus in the field, and they're working for us. We effectively, it doesn't slow our emergency response downs too much. In fact, we can maneuver around them quite well. And so, I don't have to explain to you that minutes are very important and for emergency response, especially for cardiac events and in maintaining fires in the area of origin. So, so that's basically the conversation I had. I took their presentation and what they outlaid, and I moved it up to Chief Mike Myers, and he agreed to pretty much everything that what they were proposing. And so we're in favor of creating the secondary classification.
Okay, thank you, Deputy.
Have any questions for Don or me about that?
I have one, but I'll check with the rest of the commission first. So the question, I think it was discussed in your memo, is the effectiveness of the different speed control devices in attaining speed. So can you remind us what the target speed is for neighborhood greenways?
So the guidelines say that our goal is to reach 20 miles per hour, 85th percentile speeds on neighborhood greenways. But it doesn't specify how we achieve that. And speed bumps, one of the points I made was that speed bumps are just one tool.
And speed bumps have been shown to get us to about 22, is that correct?
Yeah.
Whereas
It really depends on the character of the road. So, what are people using it for? Is it mostly local traffic or through traffic? How narrow is the roadway? Where are the stop signs placed? Those kinds of factors. So really, it's a range. We've gotten anywhere from 17 to 25, depending. Yeah.
But the speed cushions, the range is slightly higher, right? The bottom of the range is about 25.
Yes.
So in our goal to get to 20, what other tools do you have in your toolbox that can help us do that?
I think I listed them in the response, but things like narrowing the roadway. So we're talking a lot at the Bureau about ways to visually narrow the roadway. Like if you painted sort of a buffer zone between the parking and the travel lanes, you could take some of these wide local streets and make them into more narrow local streets where people drive more in the center and then pass each other where they have to. There's things like semi-diverters. So if you do a diverter only in one direction, that's something where a fire truck can easily go around it. But it does slow down traffic. It causes a little more uncertainty about people have to pay attention and see, I have to turn here, things like that. We could do alternate side parking, which kind of causes drivers to have to meander a little bit, and that tends to slow down traffic. So I think we feel like the overlap between the secondary response routes and the neighborhood greenways is very limited. We mapped them, and there's only a few places in the whole city where they overlap. And where they do, I think we feel like we can reach further into that toolbox, and we can also just acknowledge that sometimes there's a trade-off. And we need to make things better for cyclists, but we also need to ensure quick emergency response times. And we can't always do both. So that's our response.
So is everyone comfortable with that? Jeff?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I want to thank you guys because we did hear a lot of concern from the neighbors, and it seems like you were very responsive.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed you agreed to do a couple of things they asked for, post a speed sign, crosswalk markings. And so I assume that's not going in the TSP, but those are just sort of good faith promises that people can rely on.
Yeah, we identified there was one of 4 speed limit signs was missing, so we put in a work order to put that back in. And then we're already doing a project associated with the Greenway to improve the crossing at Harrison and 20th. We were not originally going to mark crosswalks, but we looked at it and staff felt it was appropriate to mark crosswalks, and that should help to slow down traffic a little bit and improve compliance at the 4-way stop there. And then I think in the future, we're updating the pedestrian master plan. We're doing other planning efforts. So I think we may very well in the future identify additional crossings along 20th. we're working on crossing spacing guidelines, which I think would call for a couple more. So in the future, we may add projects to the TSP to do further improvements. So we're very open to that. Yeah.
Right. So there are kind of two parts to number 15, as I see it. There's the emergency classification and bikeway overlap, which I think we've dispensed with. The other is the question of whether we change the classification on Southeast 20th to become, what's the technical name for the classification? I've forgotten.
For traffic?
Yeah.
Or for the neighborhood
traffic.
collector?
Neighborhood collector. So I had the opportunity to go out and ride that street on my bicycle, also ride the existing collector, which is a combination of 30th, Harrison, and 26th. I'm not convinced yet, so I'd like to discuss it a little more and get the wisdom of my colleagues here on the commission. So remind us of the motivation for moving the collector from the existing set of streets to 20th.
So there's a couple motivations. One was, for many years, we've recognized a policy conflict between the neighborhood collector and the neighborhood greenway for those 4 blocks on Harrison from 26th to 30th. That's something that really does have real-world consequences. It means we would not be able to do a diversion in the future. We would not be able to change some of the stop signs, things like that. We don't have any active project right now to do that, but we know that as traffic increases, as bicycling increases, we want to have those tools available in the future. And then sort of related, we've heard for a long time from the neighborhood, and I think we agree as staff that that route, the 26th, 30th, Harrison 30th, looks and feels like a local street, always has. It's an odd jog through the neighborhood, and it just doesn't seem appropriate for a neighborhood collector, whereas 20th has functioned as a collector, for at least 50 years, probably longer, just ever since the street network was laid out. I actually found a map recently as we were cleaning out the Portland building in preparation for our move to another building. I found an amazing, huge old map of street classifications from 1960, and 20th Avenue was a collector, and the 26th Harrison 30th was not. And at some point, that got switched, and I don't know why that was, but I think the experience of people living there is, anybody living there from the time they moved there to now has experienced it being a collector and having that level of volumes, and the people on the other route, haven't had that. So it seems like part of what we're trying to do overall with the TSP update is to set expectations correctly. And so this is the only one that came up a lot in testimony, but all throughout the city, we're trying to sort of right-size the TSP to identify, we want to make it clear where there are streets that we actually want to transition them to local. And in some cases, there are places where we've actually turned something from a collector into a local street. But we want to be clear about where we're doing that and where we're not doing that. And we don't have any intention of doing that on 20th. For one thing, it's supposed to carry bus service in the future, and we don't like to have buses on local streets if we can help it. And it's a very critical, it's one of the only continuous north-south routes in Southeast Portland. You don't get another one until Cesar Chavez. It's about a mile away. And so just to create a fine-grained network, we really thought that was important. So it's sort of about setting expectations. We don't want the neighborhood to actually expect that we're going to turn it into a local street in the future when we don't intend that.
So do we know what the traffic counts are on 20th versus the combination route?
So the traffic counts that we have recently are on Harrison. In that 4-block section, it was about 2,500 a day. Mm-hmm. So it's actually not that far from our goal, which is to get less than 2,000. And 20th, we don't have any recent traffic counts, but I believe it's around 5,000 or so. And that's pretty typical for a neighborhood collector.
So 20th is already more than Harrison?
Yeah, well more, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I do not appreciate that.
That's one of the things that it's already functioning much more as a collector street than the other route. So we have a policy mismatch. What are the current classifications is sort of telling people that we're going to turn 20, we're going to actually shift all that traffic over to the other route someday. And that's not really our intention, it wouldn't make a lot of sense in the traffic network.
Okay. And do we have any concern that 20th is actually a narrower right-of-way than the other streets?
That's not ideal. We would rather have a wider street for a collector, but it's not all that strange in Portland either. Northeast Prescott is very similar. There's sections of Fremont that are similar. We stripe it appropriately, and we have parking on one side, and in an ideal world, it would be different, but I think it works pretty well. But the directness is the really important factor, whereas the other route may be wider, but people are having to turn a lot through the neighborhoods, and there's just more conflicts when there are turns.
Far more circuitous. Okay. I guess my objection is somewhat mollified by understanding what the current traffic volumes are on 20th. So is everyone else comfortable with the staff recommendation?
I am.
Okay. Thanks, Eli.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go to number 3.
Okay, great.
Anything else?
Thank you, Deputy.
Okay, so number 3, you want to do that one? Yeah, sure, okay. So did you have a specific question, or you want me to give you the background of why we're there? Or?
Sure, why don't you give it a
Okay, sure.
background just
That's
so
fine.
we.
Yeah. So we got testimony mainly from the Northwest District Neighborhood Association, and Commissioner Smith was supportive of that testimony and in conversation about adding an objective that we used to have about that was related to what has been called the Western Bypass, and not having any additional freeways in the city of Portland, and specifically the bypass. In conversations with management and staff and Commissioner Smith, we felt it more appropriate to be more specific about, so this second sentence, and consider regional trafficways, was part of our original objective, but we didn't feel comfortable having one that was specific to one neighborhood or one part of the city related to additional capacity. So we felt that this was a good, and I think compromise is too strong of a word, but it sort of reiterated really what we had wanted originally. Eric Engstrom and I had worked on the original chapter, and he was also comfortable with the change. So for us, this was in response to that testimony and that concern about additional freeway capacity within the city, but wasn't specific to a particular neighborhood. And again, this language was existing language in the old objective, and we're just adding it to this policy. So this is an amendment technically to the comprehensive plan, since that was what was adopted, and we can do that through this process. And
And we have a number of other comp plan amendments in this process.
Amendment. So they'll, just to get a little bit in the weeds and policy wonkiness, I mean, when we go to city council, there'll be certain things that we're amending the comp plan through an ordinance. There's going to be some things that we're amending the TSP through an ordinance. There's going to be some things that we're amending through a resolution. So there's going to be a wide variety of ways we actually get there. But again, this was a conversation and a resolution that staff, management, and Commissioner Smith came to.
I guess I'm still confused.
Okay, that's fine.
You're saying, well, it was once an objective, then it wasn't an objective, but now we're going to make
Sure.
it. And
Yeah, I can.
you used the term Western bypass. That was the old objective,
Right,
but,
so
but
what
we're not
we-
talking
yeah,
about the Western bypass.
Yeah.
So
That's fine.
help me understand what it means, I guess, rather than giving me background.
Sure.
It says we're going to consider all regional trafficways. So tell me what regional trafficways are,
I'm gonna-
and that they're complete. We don't need to ever expand
yeah.
them or change them.
Right.
What does that mean? It sounds an awfully definitive statement.
So regional trafficways are generally like freeways and expressways. So sort of mostly grade separated, limited access type things. So think I-5, I-405, the Sunset Highway, expressways like the Milwaukee Expressway or 217, those kinds of facilities. And for a long time, the city of Portland has had this policy to consider it substantially complete. So there's some wiggle room, if you needed to make some minor changes. We also have, except for safety improvements, things like safety and operational improvements, which is mostly what ODOT does these days. We want to be open to that. But the idea, this was in response to, people feeling like we don't want entire neighborhoods to be bulldozed, putting in a new freeway like the old There was a Prescott Freeway that was proposed at one point, Cesar Chavez Freeway. There was a fight over I-505, I believe it was, going into the Northwest Portland. And so wanting to have a clear, stance that we don't want to accept if the state or the region decided that something was needed, we would have that policy
So
against
is the intent, Chris,
Yeah.
does this apply to the Rose Garden I-5 improvement?
I
Well, let's
warned
have some
staff
tur-
someone would say that.
I know.
Well, I was just looking for transparency.
Right.
Is that-
It is
that-
not my intent to, it's not my intent to try and capture this project and that project in this policy, and I think one could debate whether auxiliary lanes are within the,
Well, why
substantially
would it
complete.
not apply to the,
Because it's a safety improvement to an
Yeah.
existing facility.
right.
Yeah, we wouldn't consider it to apply for that because it's, when it says substantially complete, it's talking about the network. So where are they physically?
Right.
It's not really making a statement about, is it 5 lanes or 6 lanes or 7 lanes? It's talking about, we're not going to create new links in that network, brand new freeways.
Right. So the
But-
old TSP had the substantially complete term. In rewriting the policies and restructuring everything, the maintain term got substituted. And the concern that was raised in testimony and that I resonated with me is that maintain implies a floor, but maybe not so strongly implies a ceiling. And I wanted to get the substantially complete language back in there to retain the intent from the last TSP.
Yeah.
so the issue that got brought up, or I think you brought up, Chris, was it was the Northwest Neighborhood Association, was Cornell Road. So is there any relevance to Cornell Road? I mean, that's an arterial, right? It's
No,
not.
the concern was about the western bypass, which was a planned freeway connection in Washington County. But one version of that bypass that's often floated around, and it actually came up earlier this year in the legislature, was a proposal to have something like a tunnel going underneath Forest Park or through Forest Park or over, these kinds of things. That was one of the proposals, and then through North Portland.
And I raised,
Yeah.
I raised Forest Park, or I raised Cornell Road not specifically as an example of regional traffic way, but where we have policy differences with our neighbors. So Washington County has widened Cornell to 4 lanes to Skyline, and Portland has kept it at 2 lanes to Skyline. That's the mismatch. And it's the recognition that different jurisdictions have different ideas, and we want to make sure we have policy to support our ideas.
So one reason why we'd be comfortable with this is, this would still allow something like, there's another proposal that's been to improve Cornelius Pass, Highway 30, even create a new bridge across the Willamette River, northwest of St. John's Bridge. As long as that wasn't built as a freeway, as long as it was sort of a more normal roadway connection, this would not really affect that. It's really the impact of a freeway type connection that it's talking.
I guess the concern I have is it seems to be foreclosing ideas we don't even know about. And we have policies about being good regional partners. We have policies, I went and looked, Chris, you probably know them better than I.
Policies about reducing VMT.
We have a policy about regional freight traffic and how important it is to provide access, including vehicular access to move freight. And yes, we know Washington County is looking at a lot of different scenarios, some of which Portland may adamantly oppose, some of which we might find consistent with our regional policies, our regional obligations. And this feels like we're kind of needlessly stepping on the toes of our regional partners, which is not our policy. Our policy in transportation is to be good regional partners. I'm fumbling to find the paper, the policy I printed out, but there's
believe
a
you.
whole series of them that stresses when it comes to regional transportation facilities, we're supposed to be a regional partner. Things sound Trumpish to say Portland first. So I'm just concerned, this is just a small language tweak, but I think it sends an unfortunate message that maybe there's some ideas we don't even know about yet. And I don't know about what a new tunnel would look like. It sounds pretty crazy, but maybe it's going to work. But why take it off the table without considering what our regional partners are asking for? And again, I'm doing that in light of we have a lot of policies about regional transportation, particularly oriented towards freight, which I assume would be a major concern of Washington County. So it just seems to me unnecessary to to kind of go this far right now. When
Okay.
when there's a proposal on the table, the city and this commission will have an opportunity to kind of weigh it and see if it fits.
All right. Jeff and I have been debating who else would like to weigh in. Andre and then Andres.
I have some similar concerns, but I'm more looking at the RTP. And does this not constrain the RTP in terms of projects that are currently on the RTP that sit in the Portland that are actually freeway expansions? And so I'm thinking CRC, I-84, you can just go down the list that talk about whether you're talking about I-5 up East Portland, which is a project. All of those, I mean, theoretically under this, you couldn't take out I-5 on East Portland, which is a goal of ours. I mean, because you'd have to build something else because you couldn't expand the capacity. And it seems like to me, that it's kind of a backdoor reach. And I mean, throughways are euphemism for freeways. And so it just seems that the RTP is really restricted from a Portland standpoint, and I'm looking at just a Portland to say we will not be a regional partner or a state partner in getting some of the things. And if you say I-84 Broadway Weidler is a safety project, great, but it really is about freight that moves that project. And so I'm concerned that we're precluding any future, and I'm not saying that we ought to build a bunch of freeways, but that we're precluding any other future discussion and not even talking about tolls that would bring probably, that could bring as an option, a specific built tolling. That's an expansion that would be precluded here. And so I'm concerned that we just preclude a whole bunch of stuff without looking into the future, as Jeff has mentioned, and saying, what else could we do with, and I'm not saying that this needs to be an I-5 and blow down neighborhoods, but I think we will get a bite at the apple, I'm pretty sure, under the current language. And I'm not, this seems to send the wrong message.
So, yeah, so we proposed this in response to the testimony and to talking with Commissioner Smith. I mean, the original language is what we as staff proposed and was adopted by Planning Commission and City Council. And, that was a few years ago now to remember everything that we talked about. But, I think these exact same conversations were one reason we probably took it out in the first place. And so I'm going to say that, I think from a staff perspective, we were comfortable with what was in there. We were proposing something to see if there was something as it related to the testimony and Commissioner Smith's concerns. So if the commission wants to change it back, I know from a staff perspective, we had all these same conversations internally. Back to your question about the RTP, I mean, we did have the objective in the transportation system plan was there for 20 years, and we had all those same projects, and that it didn't affect those projects at the time. Could it affect it in the future? That's the question, right? And I think if that's a concern that the commission has, then make the change.
Well, the concern that I have is the language that was there previously, as you said, had transparent wiggle room
Yeah.
to do some expansion, not major freeways, but some expansion for some unknown or do something. This seems to take out that wiggle room. And that's the concern.
So Eli, you're after Andres. So Courtney, do you have a response to Andre?
No, I just was double checking our original objective, and basically, we just did the and from the original objective in the old TSP.
So wiggle room has been held constant?
So, right, so every other words were held constant.
There
So-
actually is a slight difference, and this might address your concerns. The old language said, except for safety or other improvements to existing facilities that increase their efficiency. That might offer a little bit more of the wiggle room we're talking about. If within an existing link, if there's something that operationally improves efficiency, that could be incorporated. I didn't read this as precluding even something like the CRC. And I can't think of any RTP projects currently in the RTP that would be adding brand new freeways in the city of Portland. I don't think there's any plans to. There have been some in the past, and I don't know if this policy has played into it, but there were things like a flyover connection between McLaughlin and I-5 that was planned and advanced very far, and it eventually was sort of fought against and defeated. So, this has been in place, and I don't know what effect it's had on past projects, but.
Okay. Andres and then Eli.
Could I actually have Eli go first? I'm still processing.
Okay, Eli?
Okay, sure. I like, that idea for alternate language is intriguing to add safety improvements, and if I were going to say efficiency, I would say efficiency for the city's highest prioritized mode share elements. So it's efficiency for walking and biking and things like that. When I read this, I think that Portland is going less dramatic than, I'm just thinking about Vancouver, BC, where you drive in on the highway and then eventually hit a stoplight and it trickles into the grid. This is much less dramatic than that, but it seems like someone up there made the decision to prioritize using existing infrastructure rather than having new regional or interstate lines go through the city. And I tend to like the way it's turned out there. So my instinct is to support this proposed language and think of it as a signal that we already have a lot of transportation infrastructure. We should use what we have as best we can, just make it safer. So I'm not feeling a real strong opinion on this, but that's my instinct.
Andres?
I appreciate that concept because I think what was flagged for me is I know there's a lot of separate conversation around it, but it was somewhat of a surprise to hear that the I-5 expansion is a safety project. And so in the context of that, thinking of the changes we might want to make to freeways, understanding that we're not building freeways, that we have stated goals of reducing VMT and single occupancy vehicles, making sure that this language is consistent with that. And so I think that Eli's idea, or the consensus, or not consensus, the idea that's being worked through right now of having it prioritize efficiency consistent with the city's transportation goals seems to be a more forthright way of describing the situations where freeways would be adjusted.
Okay, so I will offer a motion to adopt item 3 with the addition of the efficiency language from the existing objectives, so that wiggle room is held constant through the two
That could
TSPs.
have been a typo on my
Right.
part.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, discussion?
I'll just, since I finally found what I was fumbling for, take a moment and ask you to consider what we're doing in light of, we have, I'll count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 transportation policies having to deal with freight, related to freight in one way or another. One says we should enhance our multimodal freight transportation system for safe, reliable, sustainable, and efficient movement of goods within and through the city. I think that conflicts with what we're proposing to do now. One more, I won't belabor it, but we want to invest to accommodate forecasted growth of interregional freight volumes and provide access to truck, marine, rail, and air transportation systems, ensure designated routes and facilities are adequate for large trucks and equipment. So I think what we're doing is a little bit inconsistent. We're supposed to be good regional partners. We're supposed to be sure we're accommodating regional freight. We call that out as a policy. And I think, as Andre said, we're sort of foreclosing an option with this language. I realize there's wiggle room in all these policies. It's almost more symbolic than substantive, but I think it's an important symbolic bit of language that unnecessarily antagonizes is the wrong word. It just unnecessarily stubs the toe of some of our regional partners. So that's why I'm going to vote no.
Okay.
Procedural. Are we going to vote on this one separately?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Then,
And if there's no further points, we will proceed to that vote. Andre?
Add one more thing. I think to Andreas' point, what this language does is it causes ODOT and our regional partners to hide true projects under labels that may frustrate people. And, we're going to see a lot of safety projects, and we're going to see a lot of efficiency projects that meet policy. And when you really look at them, they're adding lanes. But that's the game we're going to push people to, and we've already done it. And so I guess you can get around it with enough wiggle room.
Okay.
Okay. Julie, would you call the roll, please?
Backrack.
No.
Goff.
No?
Larcell.
Yes.
Oswald.
Yes.
Feedback.
Yes?
St. Martin.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so that leaves us with our recommendation. Yeah, Andres?
I think in the spirit of that and knowing that it passed, I think it's important for us as a commission and for all of the staff to do their best to try to avoid situations where projects are passed under the premise of what we have in language when they are not truly addressing that
We
point.
can have a beer and talk about that sometime.
And I just wanted to follow up real quick with Commissioner Backrack's question about the improvements on 20th and Harrison that Zeph had mentioned, because you're getting ready to talk possibly about the letter. And so if there's a place where you'd like to have additional conversation about that, you can put that in the transmittal letter as well, to say something to the effect of PBOT has indicated, I mean, again, we've already put in work orders for certain things and it's moving forward, but that is a place where, when it won't be in the actual TSP, but could be in your transmittal, that's fine with us if you think it's needed, but I don't
think it is.
I don't
but
think it
maybe
is,
other
but just
commissioners
you
do
do
it.
have that
I
opportunity.
think you're on record saying it. I'm sure the
Okay.
people in the neighborhood who are concerned
Okay, just
will
wanted to
be
let
able
you
to
know.
find your commitment.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so I think we're now on to the adoption and our recommendation. So I don't think I've seen a slide with formal adoption language, so I assume we're just looking for a motion to recommend TSP Stage 3 as amended.
Correct.
And then we want to talk about adding these two supplemental recommendations to that. This is, to be open, this is my language that,
And you have to do the consent agenda too, the consent list also.
so you want to vote on this whole list?
Vote on the package of other amendments that
Okay.
were not brought up for discussion.
All right, can I have a motion to adopt the remainder of the consent matrix?
Motion to adopt the remaining consent items.
Andre, and the second to Teresa. Okay. Julie, call the roll.
Backrack.
Yes.
Goff.
Yes.
Larcell. Yes. Oswald.
Yes.
Feedback.
Yes?
St. Martin.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes. Okay. So the background on these two additional recommendations, the first one I was encouraged to write by PBOT. It was felt like we needed an actual implementation step to make particularly the motor chair goals happen. And then we also tried to incorporate Eli's desire to see interim goals. So this is not part of the document we are forwarding to council, but we're telling council, please tell PBOT to do these additional things. And Eli, that would include developing the interim goals that you requested. Okay. And the second one is one that's really been kind of a hot button for me that I have felt for a long time that we're missing the boat on the opportunity to increase work at home. We now have language in the TSP that does call for us to go from 7% to 10%, so that's a step forward. But I'd like to suggest to City Council that the city should look at adopting policies to become a model employer and show all the other major employers in town how to do this. So I think that's a good thing for us to recommend to City Council. Any discussion around these two supplementary recommendations?
The only thing I would say is the city has been using the term employer of choice.
Okay.
So if we could throw that
Change
in.
model employer
Yeah,
to employer of choice.
There's
Okay,
that
well,
employer of choice.
I'll make a friendly amendment
manifesto
to
type thing.
my recommendation. Andre?
The transit master plan, my concern, and I understand you say share in partnership with TriMet, but that appears to be the city of Portland developing transit routes for TriMet. And I I'm concerned that that's a big step on toes. Because to get to, I work with TriMet quite a bit around just looking at the enhanced program, and they get very concerned when Portland or other jurisdictions start laying out routes for them. And so I'm concerned that you get to a transit, you get to a jurisdictional issue, and we're not partners anymore.
I would just weigh in a little bit on that to note that I think this is something that TriMet has supported our involvement in, and it's not so much laying out new routes because with some exceptions, the routing is fairly complete in at least in central Portland, but a lot of the topic discussed in this is how do we keep buses moving through traffic, and that is very much a PBOT issue because we control how the lanes are striped and whether they can have exclusive lanes and things like that. And so it gets back to what is that plan really about? It may be more about how to move existing bus lines more efficiently than it is about new lines.
Yeah, so our model for this was the Seattle Transit Master Plan, which is actually being updated for the second time. It's on its second iteration. And they, similar to us, they have a transit agency that's much bigger than them. They have King County Metro. It's the entire county. And I think they got the same questions. Why would you do a transit master plan? I think what they found is that the transit agency has certain things that, they keep an eye on. They're trying to serve an entire region. They're being pulled in a lot of directions. And they're serving jurisdictions that have much lower ambitions than we have for a mode share. And so, and their transit master plan didn't really look at new routes, changes to routes, except when in the process of developing it with the transit agency, I think in some cases the transit agency and the city noticed that maybe we should actually use this street instead of that street. It would actually go faster. Small changes like that. But yeah, I think this would be building off of the work we've already been doing with growing transit communities, enhanced transit corridors, the service enhancement plans that TriMet's been doing. So I think we consider that we've done some of the puzzle pieces of this master plan already, but what we haven't done is really this strategy for how to get that mode share, because it's a huge leap from where we are today to get up to 25%.
My concern, just real quickly, is the issue of when you look at East Portland, there's a donut hole. There's just not the transit routes, especially the express transit routes, the 20-minute routes. And so, and East Portland has asked TriMet repeatedly for better routing, new routes on streets and things. And TriMet has said no for a variety of reasons. But a master plan, to me, addresses community concerns. And if you're not doing a master plan to address community concerns, then, especially in East Portland, I'm concerned.
I think in TriMet has been the lead in engaging the community on where should future service be expanded to, and that was reflected. I think you had a briefing last year in the, forgetting the term that they called it,
The service enhancement.
service enhancements plans. Yes, thank you. So I don't think we see this as a replacement for that process. It's building on that and giving the city and TriMet a more explicit area to take the next steps.
Yeah, I think the network shown on that service enhancement plan for East Portland, the network is actually really good and does meet the community concerns. It's more about, that plan didn't specify things like frequencies, and I think that's where more of the concerns are is, you can get these routes, but if they're not frequent enough, they're not super useful, and also the access to transit. And so this master plan, I think, would be looking more at those issues is what do we need to do as a city to push it in that direction to make it a really useful network.
And I'll note that the consent list we just adopted included upgrading our classification for 148th and 162nd to indicate future frequent service. So we're all rowing in the same direction, and I think this is about saying that we want PBOT to row a little harder and be a little more complete in their thinking. But Andre's...
And indicating this too gives direction to PBOT management in the midst of budget season, the direction to, work on this, possibly hire a transit coordinator, which you could put comma transit coordinator in there maybe. So I think.
You're not going to apply for the job, right?
Oh, that would be bad, right? Yeah. So I think, understanding those concerns, I think having it in this letter does give indication to management and PBOT that transit and the exact issues that Andre and others are bringing up are important and should be a part of that master plan. And I know that our management, Art Pierce, was very supportive of this, of having this in there. He's been wanting to have something like this for a while. So again, having something from Planning Commission to City Council, just gives it that much more heft. And I think, again, Commissioner Baugh, if there's some specific things you'd want to say in the transmittal letter about that master plan or about that, you can always give us direction in that letter or in conversations after that aren't as official. It's up to you how you'd like to do that, but we're open to that.
Thank you. Andres.
I've been hearing a lot of concern from the community about reports. Bus ridership is down and congestion is up. And I think a lot of times when plans are created, we set goals and targets and not always, we don't always follow up with the resources and the steps to get there. So this seems like a step towards meeting the transportation goals we've had, and to kind of, like you've been saying, connect the dots to make sure that we have an approach on how to reach our goals for transit ridership. So I'm supportive.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to recommend the TSP Stage 3 as amended, along with these supplemental recommendations, changing the phrase model employer to employer of choice. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Teresa. Second? Andre seconds. Julie, call the roll.
Backrack?
Yes.
Baugh? Yes. Larcell? Yes. Fossville? Yes. Evac?
Yes?
St. Martin? Yes. Smith?
Yes, it's unanimous.
All right, well, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
All right. Maybe we'll never see you again. I don't know.
Somehow I doubt it.
Somehow I doubt it, but you never know.
Okay,
Interim goals
There's some interim goals, right, transit master plan. Thank you. Have a good evening.
thanks. We have staff up for the map refinement project, please.
Chris, we want to grab some extra chairs. So can you give us all a minute?
So I just want to let the audience know that we're going to be moving some more chairs in. I'm right in the way here. Okay. So just give us a few minutes to get situated, and then we can get everyone comfortable here shortly.
And we noticed 2 minutes.
We're going to end up using my phone.
All right, Marty, you want to give us the overview?
So thanks for the turnout this evening. We are going to be having a public hearing tonight on the map refinement project. My name is Marty Stockton. I am the Southeast District Liaison and the project manager of the map refinement project. I am not going to be giving a formal presentation tonight. The formal presentation was held on September 26th before the Planning and Sustainability Commission. The purpose for tonight is truly to get to the public hearing component of just the time before you. I did want to make a couple of comments, and then we can get to about the 40 or so people that have signed up this evening. Again, we do have 90 minutes allotted for the hearing, And I think we have probably some flexibility on that 90 minutes as well. We do want to get to everyone this evening. So the map refinement project, to just kind of take a step back, this was a project that came out of the 2035 comprehensive plan. We were directed by City Council in December of 2016 to evaluate about 13 sites that they heard from community members in public testimony in fall of 2016. And so hence the map refinement project. Staff also took some time in scoping this project to do a legislative project as a bit of an undertaking, and so we wanted to make sure that there was a bit of value add. And so we did add 3 additional categories. I'm going to just walk through those 3 additional categories so everyone's clear on kind of the scope of the map refinement project. So again, there's the Exhibit O, which is number 1, which is what City Council directed staff to look at. The next item is for sites that are currently going before Bureau of Development Services through a quasi-judicial comprehensive plan map or zoning map amendment. So that's item number 2. Item number 3 is where there were areas citywide that were downzoned. That means areas that reduced development capacity that currently have development in the pipeline. We are looking at those properties. We are watching carefully what development is happening and making sure to address any potential non-conforming development. So that's item number 3. And then the 4th item is really for technical map changes. So those would include sites that are split zoned. Those would include sites that we are working and conducting some coordination with other city bureaus. Those are also include sites that have non-conforming commercial uses. So those are sites where there's a residential zone, but a long-standing commercial business. And then one of the final items is for sites that are owned by affordable housing providers. Because we are currently in a housing emergency, there is a desire to work very closely and coordinate with our affordable housing providers. So that's kind of the last component. So as you're listening to testimony this evening, this is not a free-for-all on our citywide comprehensive plan and zoning map. We are really looking at testimony that is either on actual map change proposals or meets one of those 4 categories that I just outlined for the room. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and step back and listen to testimony this evening. And I can come back if there's any questions at the end of the hearing.
Yeah, I think at the end we'll want to give the commission a chance to give you any takeaway questions.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, before I call up the first testifiers, I do need to ask if any members of the commission have an actual or potential conflict of interest to declare relative to this. Jeff?
I don't have an actual or technical conflict, but I do have an appearance of one I'd just like to share. I'm on the board of as a real estate advisor at Central City Concern, which I assume most of you know who they are. They're a healthcare provider as well as an affordable housing provider, and they're going to be seeking a zone change tonight under what Marty described as Category 4. They're an affordable housing provider. They also have a split zone site, so I think it is a eminently reasonable request, which I encourage them to make. And I am told by the city attorney, technically I have no financial interest. I don't have a conflict. But as a strong advocate for them and as a member of CCC's advisory committee, I don't think I'm going to vote. So we've had this discussion internally about what's appropriate as a matter of transparency. And I'm hesitating only because I don't want to set a precedent that every time any one of us has an advocacy role in the community, they're foreclosed from participating. But since we don't have clear guidance on this, I'll go ahead and not participate on that matter. But I will urge you to pay close attention to their eminently reasonable request. Thank you.
All right, the transparency is appreciated. Teresa?
I don't believe this is covered in any of the items, but I'll just state it. I own a commercial property in Mississippi on 915 North Shaver.
Thank you. Andres, did you have something?
In the spirit of not quite conflicts of interest, as a public employee, I have no financial conflict of interest, but some Portland Housing Bureau properties are mentioned in the testimony, and I am an employee of the Portland Housing Bureau.
Okay, thank you. All right, I will be calling people up 3 at a time. You have 2 minutes to testify. Unfortunately, we do not have lights to help you, but Julie will be keeping time on her phone and will let you know when your 2 minutes are up. So I will, again, read out names 3 at a time, and I'll give you 3 ahead so you can get ready. So our first 3 are Brian Dapp, Peter Fry, and Jim Hlava, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I apologize if I'm not. They will be followed by Maura Lederer, Corey Higgins, and David Schulhammer.
Hi, my name's Jim Hlava. You did a good job. It's a hard name to pronounce. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay. All right, Brian, would you like to start?
Yes, please. Good evening. My name is Brian Dapp. I live at 872 Southwest Broadway Drive in Portland. Tonight I'm here to provide testimony against adoption of the proposed zoning designation RH with a maximum FAR of 2-to-1 for land located in the Markham Hill commercial node adjacent to OHSU. I've also brought written testimony for each of the commissioners, which includes maps and, importantly, letters from people who live, work, and study in the area but could not be here this evening. I respectfully urge you to carefully review these materials. To be clear, the zoning matter referred to in these materials is located literally right across the street from OHSU on Markham Hill. As is well known and appreciated, OHSU is a regional teaching hospital and is an incredibly valuable resource for the health and well-being for Portland area citizens, not to mention those who travel to OHSU from across the Pacific Northwest, and for those citizens throughout the world who are now beginning to depend on critical research being conducted at OHSU. OHSU employs over 12,000 people on the Markham Hill campus. This figure does not include employees of the VA hospital, Shriners Hospital, nor does it include the many OHSU graduate and professional students, nor does it include OHSU patients and their families. The 2035 Comp Plan Guide states that Portland can expect 260,000 new residents in the next 20 years. Where are these people going to live? And do we want to increase possibilities for people to live close to work, thereby reducing traffic congestion, and vehicle miles traveled? To give you an important example of why and how the BPS proposal falls short of the mark, our current zoning designation, CM or mixed commercial, allows new development with a 45-foot maximum height limit. However, the current proposal you are being asked to approve would mean that for the majority of land in the node, new development would have a maximum height limit of 25 feet or 2 stories.
Could you wrap up, please?
Yes. Maximum height limit of 25 feet across the street from 12,000 jobs does not sit well with us who know the area as well as we do. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Peter?
Jim will speak first.
Hi, my name's Jim Hlava, and I'm the Vice President of Housing for Cascadia Behavioral Healthcare. Cascadia is a not-for-profit organization that works with people with mental illness and addictions, and we serve about 16,000 people a year. We own 46 properties and nearly 700 units of affordable housing. We're interested in a property on 101st and Southeast Ankeny to build a healthcare clinic and affordable housing to replicate another project that we're just completing up on. The property is zoned currently in a way that allows us to do this, but there's a planned zone change that would create only, allow it to be only commercial. So I think Peter's going to talk more about specifics.
So my name is Peter Finley Fry. The property currently is zoned EXD, which allows the full continuum of care that Cascadia needs to build. And the property is going to be zoned general employment, which wouldn't actually be bad because the current general employment allows a conditional use for the residential component. So we're caught in this really weird position where we can't really file for a conditional use if in fact we were general employment. which we could get ahead of the curve. And we're losing our EXD zone, which eliminates our ability. So we've met with planning staff. We're working with our neighbors because we don't want a spot zone. We're talking about essentially continuing either the CXD west to cover our site or to put in put the EXD back. And that would be something that we would rely on the Bureau of Planning and you to kind of sort through that if you support this extremely important thing. I want to end by pointing out that these facilities are extremely difficult to site. I do the Wapato Jail, I do women's shelters, I did all the downtown shelters, and you cannot, I mean, you can imagine how very, very difficult it is to get these critical components in place. And we are in a crisis. We need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next three are Maura Lederer, Corey Higgins, David Scholhammer. They'll be followed by Barry Smith, Sabina Wallfiler, sorry if I butchered that, David Cole. All right, Maura, if you're ready.
I am. Good evening. My name is Maura Lederer. I'm an employee of Central City Concern, and we are an affordable housing provider in the city of Portland, have been for about 50 years now. We're a nonprofit agency, and in addition to providing affordable housing, we also provide medical clinic services and supportive services. So I'm here tonight because we are in the process of developing a new Eastside campus complex, which consists of 175 units of affordable housing plus a federally qualified health care clinic. And in conjunction with this, we are purchasing a parcel of property that is across the street. And I'm sorry, I neglected to give you the address. Essentially, the Eastside Campus project is located at the northwest corner of 122nd and Burnside. So in connection with this Eastside Campus project, we are purchasing 5 contiguous parcels, which are located across the street from Eastside Campus. Of those 5 contiguous parcels, 3 are currently slotted to have a zone change from the existing CX zone to a CM3 zone. However, the other remaining 2 of these parcels are currently zoned RH, and they are not currently defined or designated to have a zone change. So as noted, we're purchasing this property in conjunction with the Eastside Campus and to provide additional affordable housing. And so it's under that guideline that we are applying or requesting this zone change for these 2 additional parcels. And let's see. Sorry, lost my notes. Given the
If you could wrap up, please.
Yes. Anyways, so the property ID numbers are defined in a letter we submitted to the city already. We also have a map that's attached to that letter, and we thank you very much for your consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Corey?
My name's Corey Higgins. I live at 2443 Southeast Main. This is regarding properties for proposed rezoning from 2438 to 2450 Southeast Main. There's proposed to change the zoning from a R5 to an R2 multiple housing. I've lived on Main Street in the same house for 40 years, and it's been very apparent that in the past few years that the neighborhood has become maxed out for people living there. The street I live on is there's no parking anymore. This is a dead-end street where this property is on the end of a dead-end street. It's part of a bigger piece of property, I think is what you're referring to as a split zone, that they want to combine all together. And I've no doubt that if it is combined, it's going to be developed into apartments or row houses or something on the end of this dead-end street, which is already full. Being a dead-end street, the emergency vehicles would have a very difficult time getting up the street and doing anything there. There's already, on this larger piece of property that this is part of, there's already 13 affordable housing units, and I have no doubt that they're gonna, if it was all combined into one zone, they're gonna bulldoze those and put up non-affordable housing. So, I'm not opposed to the building at the end of the street, but it should be kept as single family, just in keeping with the neighborhood.
So just so I'm clear, it's currently R2.5 and you want it to stay R2.5 rather than go to R2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And what's the address? I'm not seeing it on the list.
The address that came up when I went there was 2438 to 2450 Southeast Main.
Okay.
It's at the end where Main Street dead ends at 25th Street.
Thank you.
Okay. David?
David Scholhammer, I chair the Land Use Committee for the Selwood Moreland Improvement League, better known as SMILE. To correct an error in the comprehensive plan map, we request that the property at 5301 to 5313 Southeast 19th Avenue be zoned R1. This and many other properties in Northwest Moreland were upzoned in the 1980s in anticipation of a light rail station at Harold Street. The Orange Line was built without that station, so the 2035 comprehensive plan map downzoned some of these properties, including eliminating RH zoning, which is incompatible with the neighborhood. The Multnomah County Assessor and PortlandMaps.com incorrectly state that there is a duplex on this lot. In reality, there is a triplex and a duplex. The comprehensive plan map incorrectly changed the zoning on this 10,000 square foot lot from RH to R2.5, which makes it non-conforming. Therefore, the map refinement project has proposed RH zoning on this property, and we request that it be zoned R1 instead. All other RH zoning in this area has been removed, except where an RH scale project has been or is being built or permitted. There is no permit activity for new construction on this property. The property has CE zoning on two sides and R2.5 zoning on the other two sides, so R1 is more compatible with the adjacent properties than RH. There is also a significant amount of R1 zoning in the Northwest Moreland, so it would be consistent with zoning in this area. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Jeff?
David, before you leave, let me ask you a question. I'll take a close look at it because I'm comfortable going with a higher zoning on the east side of Southeast 17. But I've always been bothered by the neighborhood association's reluctance to allow the RH to continue in place on the west side of 17th. It's about a block deep, you must know it, between Milwaukee and Southeast 17th. We have, as part of the package tonight, a whole bunch of, I think we're calling them reconciliations, where there's been development at the RH level, even on properties that are proposed to be downzoned. It creates quite a checkerboard in that area between Southeast 17th and Milwaukee. And I'm wondering, is there any receptivity, or how would your group feel if that area stayed at RH? Just that one block wide, I'm not sure where we'd draw the line, 4 or 5 blocks north to south.
There is one fairly significant area that's sort of clustered around 17th and Inslee that has several RH developments planned or in the pipeline. We've actually had contact meetings for 2 more properties that aren't in the report yet, but I expect will be in the report before it gets past City Council. We would not be receptive to that. The RH zoning is just very much out of character. Also, that area up there with the construction of the Orange Line, bus lines 31, 32, and 33 no longer serve along McLaughlin. So that area of Northwest Moreland actually has less mass transit than it did 5 years ago. And so placing the high density there just isn't appropriate.
Just to be clear, it currently is RH.
Yes.
And it's had quite a bit of development at the RH level.
I think there's about 6 or 10 lots that you have
Okay.
to
And
retain the RH
isn't
zone.
there frequent bus service both on Southeast 17th and on Milwaukee?
Yes, there is for the
Okay.
definition. But there's also less service in that area too.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll note for folks coming up that we do ask you to read your name into the record, but you don't have to read your address into the record. So if you want to save a couple seconds to get to your point, feel free to do so. The next three are Barry Smith, Sabina Wallfiler, David Cole. They'll be followed by John Ross, Larissa Zimmerman, and Alistair Williamson.
Hi, my name is Barry Smith. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight on the hottest World Series game ever. Go Dodgers. And we need to talk about baseball one day. It's coming. I've submitted testimony on several areas that I would like to add some tools for flexibility in design, adding some urban center designations and urban corridor designations to some areas of towns that we've been trying to develop but haven't been able to quite get there. I'm like Peter, we're getting a lot of questions about what's happening today and what's going to happen after the plan is implemented, so we've been doing some modeling. And what we're finding is that we're not getting much beyond our base zone for area ratio allowable areas without some adjustments or some additional tools. And it concerns me because these areas are precious. Our development sites are precious. When we finally can get them tipped to do something more, we want to be able to achieve the goals of the 2035 plan. And the way the map is being refined right now, it may not be. And that means that the 2035 plan goals are not being met by the mapping, and the mapping is failing the goals. So I've submitted the testimony on some areas, and I would like to really encourage you to expand the staff scope to look at all these areas, because I've been doing it. When the clients are constantly asking me for, where can we provide these housing and commercial and employment opportunities? Where can we make areas work where people can walk to work or work at home or walk to their sales and services instead of having to take single occupancy vehicles? I think cars are history in this town, and these planning tools will help us get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sabina Wohlfeiler, and I'm going to talk in regard to the buffer zone between St. Helens Road and Willamette Heights. In the 90s, I and many other residents of Willamette Heights gave testimony before both the Planning Commission and the City Council regarding this buffer zone. Issues addressed then are still of concern today. When a developer illegally removed the toe of the hillside to build a 24-hour truck stop, it began an extensive review. He sought a variance and the neighborhood opposed it. The land was found to be geologically unstable. A letter from the developer's own soils engineer stated that at 7 and 11 feet there was silt, which turns to liquid during an earthquake. A now deceased neighbor testified about a landslide that had occurred at the bottom of 33rd Street, my street, during the 1950s that closed St. Helens Road. The land was found to have 3 underground streams. This and other relevant information resulted in an environmental overlay, and development ceased. If any of these existing protections are removed from this land, which would happen if you took away the buffer classification and put it into the base zone, it could serve as a green light for developers to once again remove vegetation to make industrial use of this property. Changing the setback requirements from 20 to 10 feet could result in an industrial building being built right next to a Willamette Heights residence. City planners say that the steepness of the hillside and other safeguards will protect this land, but given past history, I'm not so confident. I'm asking you to retain the buffer designation on this land. The geological makeup of the land has not changed. In developers' language, I'm asking you for a variance. please make an exception for this buffer. As the metropolitan area grows and we make changes to accommodate this growth, there are some circumstances where we need to protect the land and the quality of life here in Portland. I believe this is one of those circumstances. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Good job. Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Cole. Thanks for your time. I'm here in opposition to the proposed rezoning of 705 North Fremont and 815 North Fremont at North Albina Avenue from CM2 to CM3, commercial mixed use. Bit of history here. The City Council voted to change it from R2.5 to CM2 last year as part of the comp plan. So I, along with most of my neighbors, pretty much the whole block, feels that the CM3 is woefully out of place for what is otherwise a residential block. Our home stand is close to 3 feet away from these property lines, and the rezoning for CM3, as you know, it's 75 feet potentially, 6 or 7 stories, and immediately to the south of our residences, it would shade us out. We would be in permanent shade, especially in the wintertime, and it almost is a de facto condemnation of our properties. It feels like eminent domain, and it's terrifying. I mean, it's already emotionally disastrous for us, and it could be financially as well. Please understand, I'm not against density. None of us are. We like the CM2, and we think it should be there. The city's own mixed-use zones project document describes CM2 as intended to complement the scale of surrounding residentially zoned areas, whereas CM3 is generally meant to be more urban and such in the documents we've read. We circulated a petition around the neighborhood very immediately and got 30 signatures. Moreover, the Boise Elliott Neighborhood Association voted last month unanimously in opposition of this rezoning. We would just like to really keep it CM2 if we can. Having a 75-foot building just to the south of our house is everything on the other side of Fremont is shorter than that, and I don't understand why it would be taller on our side of the street when we're residential everywhere. So, thanks for your time.
Thank you. The next 3 are John Ross, Larissa Zimmerman, Alistair Williamson. They will be followed by Bob Johnson, Virginia Burgess, and Alan Dobbins, or Dobbins, I'm not sure which. John?
I'm John Ross. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm also here to talk about the rezoning of 705 and 815 North Fremont, potentially to CM3. As close neighbors, we're very concerned about the impacts this could have on our street, which is already struggling to accommodate new density. We don't oppose increased density as a goal, and we fully support the desire the economic diversity brought by mixed income housing. However, we feel that this particular change is completely out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood. A 6 to 7 story building at the south end of a block of single family houses will cast a deep, dark shadow over our lives and endanger our efforts to contribute to city livability with gardens and trees. Developing these lots to their full footprint is already going to significantly diminish our sense of open space and our urban canopy, but a building on this scale will make it even worse by shadowing our trees and plants. We worry too about the psychological impact of these shadows on neighbors who suffer seasonal affective disorder. We're also concerned that our alleyways, which have been a vital key to surviving new density, will be endangered by a project on this scale. Recent smaller scale development on our block seriously clogged our alley during building and significantly degraded it in the process. This alley is used vigorously by businesses along Mississippi as well as neighbors who park their cars behind their houses, freeing up parking on the already crowded streets in front. What would this scale of development do to our alley and our local parking? Finally, we're disappointed by the lack of transparency in the process that brought this proposed change before you. The notice we received in the mail, which we understood was not circulated beyond a handful of directly impacted addresses and failed to reach some of those, was not at all specific about the location or scope of the change being proposed. One had to have access to the internet and then be a savvy and persistent inquirer of the map app in order to determine what the change consisted of and the location it would affect. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alistair Williamson, and I'm here to testify in support of the planned split zoning at 8500 Northeast Siskiyou. I live at 8650 Northeast Siskiyou. It's directly across the street from me. This is an old landfill and is being developed by two communities working together, a Buddhist temple and a co-housing group. And Buddhist temple's already well on its way, and we have planning permission for the co-housing. What we discovered, however, is that the overall zoning, which is EG2 currently, makes it hard to finance the co-housing. Our bank is legitimately worried if 50 years from now or 20 years from now, the monastery moves to the Olympic Peninsula as affiliated housing, what happens to the co-housing development? Can it continue to grow and change? What are the rules? So the proposed split zoning, which puts R1 where the co-housing would be and retains the EG2 on the rest, is tremendously valuable to us. Reclaiming a landfill is muddy, slow, laborious, expensive work. And my wife and I moved to the area to help do that, knowing it would take time, hoping that we could live on this. And the communities have opened it up. It's becoming a beautiful piece of land. There's public access through it. There's literally hundreds of people who walk their dogs through it now every day. So I guess I want to do two things. One, express my appreciation that this proposal could come through, because it'll make things more flexible for us, and say I'm done.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Larissa Zimmerman, and I live on Albina Street. I'm here to talk about the potential change of CM2 to CM3 at 705-815 North Fremont. And I understand that the proposal, the idea is that Fremont Street is going to be a sort of gateway to the Mississippi District, which has become a thriving business district. And I've lived in Portland my entire life. My grandparents are from Portland. I'm a native. And so when I was finally able to purchase a house, because people were throwing loans at folks like me who work low-income service industry jobs back in the early aughts, I was not at all surprised that the place that I found a place to live in was the Albina neighborhood. It was traditionally low-income housing, the entire neighborhood. The two lots that are talking about this proposed change are both a low-income rental property where my neighbor Mayello works at the rebuilding center and is able to afford rent, adjacent to the thriving Mississippi neighborhood. She's about to be evicted. She was just notified today that her rent is going to be doubled. Across the street from there is the Lydia Roy Apartments, which is a low-income housing complex. And they have been wonderful neighbors. And one of the guys who lives there volunteers at the Portland Art Museum where I work. And I also see him at the Chinese Garden. And he's a wonderful man, and it's a beautiful little piece of land that's going to be, inevitably, turned into a 4-story building. The question is, will it be turned into a 7-story building? At what point is this no longer the neighborhood that we love in Portland? The historic racism that led to the fact that it was the ghetto in Portland. Is this once again social engineering that is happening on the poorest folk in our city? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next three are Bob Johnson, Virginia Burgess, Alan Dobbins. They'll be followed by Roma Barman, Gene Harrison, and Milton Jones.
Good evening. I'm Bob Johnson, interim president and CEO of Terwilliger Plaza, which is, as our tagline says, a community of empowered and engaged people. Terwilliger Plaza is a nonprofit continuing care retirement community that provides a broad range of services to persons 65 years of age and older. Founded in the 1950s, Terwilliger Plaza received its first residents following completion of the original structure in 1962. We currently serve about 350 seniors who reside in independent and assisted living apartments. Terwilliger Plaza has been a very successful community providing services to seniors for over 55 years. Over that time, the plaza has purchased property for expansion of its services and extending its vision of what a retirement community should be. Those adjacent properties we purchased happen to be in 4 different zone designations. Last year, the City Council, under the Portland Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update, corrected the issue of multiple zones by combining the entire property owned by Terwilliger Plaza into a single designation, RH High Density Residential. The issue that Terwilliger Plaza now faces is that the lot occupying the southeast corner of Block 26, which is on the corner of Southwest 5th Avenue and Southwest Sheridan Street, was not under our ownership last year and therefore was not included in the correction. The owner specifically requested it not be included at that time, perceiving that the property may retain a higher value with a commercial zoning. Terwilliger Plaza has now signed a purchase agreement to acquire that lot, and we have the seller's approval and support to request that this lot be included in the RH zone designation. If that request is honored, the entire property Terwilliger Plaza controls, and specifically Block 26, will be under a single zone RH. We also ask that the height overlay map of 120-16 be amended to include this parcel in the RH area that allows a 4-to-1 floor area ratio. This will also match the designation of the adjacent properties. These 2 changes will bring uniformity to the block and allow Terwilliger to go forward with development plans. Thank you for your consideration.
I'm Virginia Burgess, a resident at Terwilliger Plaza for the last 3 years. I've been involved with the plaza since 1985 when my mother moved there. Presently, I serve on the Finance Committee of the Board of Directors and chair the Employees Retirement Plans Fiduciary Committee. Over the past 16 years, while not a resident, I have served on and chaired the Terwilliger Plaza Foundation Board and served on the governing board of the plaza and as treasurer of the board. During these years, I have seen continuous development and improvements to both the facilities and the services offered to residents. We have seen expanded dining and assembly areas, the addition of central air conditioning, double-glazed windows. In 1999, the addition of a 48-unit assisted living building connected to the original tower building. In 2008, another connected independent living building that added 44 large apartments, an indoor pool, and expansive wellness and exercise facilities for use by all residents. We have added in-home care services as an alternative to a move to a full assisted living. When apartments are turned over in any of the buildings, we upgrade the units to current standards. All this and more has been accomplished while remaining financially sound. Terwilliger Plaza residents are attracted to our urban location, to the strong sense of community that prevails among us, and to our proximity to Portland State University classes, downtown events, and the immediate availability of multiple mass transit choices. Presently, we have long waiting lists. Recently, we have been purchasing adjacent properties in anticipation of adding to our capacity and our mission of service to seniors. We believe that expanded living options, dedicated memory care facilities, and other improvements will benefit both our residents and the city's interest in maintaining a vital core. I ask that you grant our request to amend the designation of Block 26 to show the entire block, including the southeast corner of the property, be designated RH High Density Residential. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alan Dobbins, and I just want to say thank you all for the public service that you do. I used to work for the Portland Public Schools as a senior administrator. A lot of folks I've never told thank you or seen the good job you do. I also live in Terwilliger Plaza and have the privilege of serving as chairperson of our Finance Committee, and we're keenly interested in getting Block 26 to RH High Density Residential. The same classification as all the rest of the block is, just not us. We are making this request because of a proposed expansion the plaza is seeking, as Jenny suggested, to substantially increase the number of residents the plaza can accommodate presently approximately 350 up to 150 more to 500. And also more employees work there. The economics of scale, building on and expanding a successful facility, we believe will be good for Portland. And think of the future. The silver tsunami is coming. I'd like to give a little personal history which might explain how CCRCs work and why my passion is so keen on increasing the size and scope of the plaza. My wife of over 50 years, now deceased, when we moved to the plaza a decade ago, had already been declared legally blind by the state, and she was well along the dreadful path of advanced Alzheimer's disease. We were able to share several months together while we lived in our independent living apartment. When it became apparent that she was no longer able to, that I could not sustain her in the apartment, she was moved to assisted living. Our extended family, she lived there for 3 to 4 months and died peacefully. All my daughters were there. Our extended family continues grateful for the excellent care she received at Terwilliger Plaza. Growing the size of the plaza will provide living accommodations for as many 150 additional residents who will be able to receive the same quality of care that my wife received. We hope you will successfully loan the Block 26 designated RH high density residential. Thank you for our plead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next three are Roma Barman, Gene Harrison, Milton Jones, followed by Brett Schwartz, Sarah Spots, and Jane Robeson. Okay.
We didn't mean to wake you on.
Is
A little red flag, maybe.
I like that one. Hello, I'm Roma Barman. I will speak about the buffer zone on Northwest 33rd Street. Livability in the Willamette Heights neighborhood is a very important issue to all of us who live there. We have a unique neighborhood which is within walking distance of both Forest Park and the Northwest Industrial Area. Many of the homes are older, having been built before the industrial area existed. For the most part, the industries in the neighborhood near them have coexisted peacefully. We have a small amount of buffer areas consisting of trees and other vegetation. One area of this buffer is below Northwest 33rd and Wilson Streets leading to Northwest St. Helens Road. Northwest 33rd is a dead-end street. Without this buffer, it would be very unpleasant in terms of added noise, pollution, and possibly closer industrial activity, which would be very incompatible with our tranquil neighborhood. The trees and vegetation act as a natural buffer, filtering noise, pollution, and industrial views. This issue, I thought, was resolved in the 1990s when the neighbors successfully prevented the building of a 24-hour diesel fuel station in that area. It took 3 years of hard work to protect our neighborhood. Please do not undo an issue which has already been dealt with and resolved. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jean Harrison. I'm speaking tonight on item 1724, which is 2525 Northwest Lovejoy. And this is property that is currently in medical office uses, and the property owner requested commercial zoning. Staff, in their presentation earlier, I can't remember the date, but their earlier presentation, had said that this request is deactivated, and I'm just here to remind the commission that I do not support the change that the property owner asked for, nor does my neighbor, and nor does our neighborhood association. And that's because this intersection of 25th and Lovejoy is already a disaster, and the last thing we need is additional commercial zoning. Right now, 76% of the traffic that goes through that intersection comes from Washington County. And we're trying to control some of these problems in the neighborhood with a access and circulation study that will be started in January and led by the Bureau of Transportation. So what we're trying to do, at least hold the ground for now and make sure that we can address the problems that we already have without compounding those. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Milt Jones. I'm from the Homestead Neighborhood Association. The Homestead Neighborhood Association is essentially Markham Hill, including the hospital complexes, OHSU, the Veterans Hospital, Shriners, Dornbecker on top of the hill. Unlike the reputation for other neighborhood associations, I want to assure you that the Homestead Neighborhood Association is actually welcoming further residential development on the top of the hill. Currently, the properties up there are underdeveloped, and we would like to see that area developed as a walk-to-work neighborhood for employees of the medical institutions. We would also like to see more commercial development on the top of the hill than is there now that would serve that growing neighborhood and the medical institutions. What we don't want to see is the scale of development, especially commercial development, that will become automobile magnets for traffic going up and down the hill. It's an accident of history that we have the city's largest employer on the top of a hill, surrounded by city parks and residential neighborhoods, and commuter traffic is trying to use an inadequate access up Sam Jackson Parkway. The result is that traffic filters up through our residential neighborhoods down below. It is truly a mess. The traffic going through cutting through residential neighborhoods is 4 or 5 times what the streets are designed for. So we don't want to see development on top of the hill that will attract additional commuter traffic. That would include, for example, commuter parking or commercial developments of a size that would attract commuter traffic. And I'll just leave you with that.
Okay, thank you. So the next three are Brett Schwartz, Sarah Spots, and is Jane Robeson still here? I was told she left. Jane? She left. Okay, then we'll add Silas Beebe. And they will be followed by Joseph Schaefer, Rich Rogers, and Jessica Engman.
All right. My name is Brett Schwartz. I'm here for my own property, 9811 Southeast Foster Road. Under the new comp plan, it's supposed to be zoned to EG1 general employment, which doesn't allow residential use. And right now, as my primary residence is a detached single-family home, I have concerns that in the event of some natural disaster or something else, that my house ends up being unlivable, that I will not be able to replace my house, and I'll join the homeless community that's here. On the map, oddly enough, I am the only one that has changed. Everyone else is still remaining CM3. I am like a cutout of CM3, and I am the only lot in a 6-block radius that is going to be changed to EG1. So I'm here today to request that I join every adjacent property and also get zoned as CM3 to allow myself to potentially fix and maintain a house. So thank you for your consideration.
I'm sorry, and what do you zone currently? I didn't hear that.
Currently, it's EX, which I believe allows the same as CM3.
Hi, my name is Sarah Spots, and I just wanted to thank Marty and her team and the rest of the commission. I'm here in support of the rezoning of my condo association property, at 4341 and 4353 Northeast 45th or Halsey, and as well as the rezoning that is taking place in the area around us. So it's items number 1717 and 1800. And it's rezoning from RX to RH, the two large apartment buildings near us, and then RX to R1, our property as well as neighboring properties, and also zoning R1, the 1500 and 1600 block of Northeast 45th. So I just wanted to say that I support this zoning changes, and thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Silas Beebe. Oh, geez. I'm Silas Beebe, fifth generation Portlander, and grew up in Portland. I've seen it change quite a bit over the last 40 years. Live in Willamette Heights, and I'm hoping to persuade you to maintain the buffer on the buffer B on the lot on St. Helens Road. I actually live abutting directly at that. I'm at the bottom of the hill, at the bottom of 33rd, directly adjacent to that to that lot. And, as Willamette Heights residents, we put up with a lot of air, noise, and water pollution. We put up with quite a lot of pollution from the neighbors there. And this is the only buffer we have between railroads, truck stops, heavy traffic, steel manufacturing, and the only buffer we have between a residential neighborhood and very heavy 24/7 industrial work is this slim little buffer. And we'd love to maintain it and keep it from being turned into truck stop or something like that. And so that's all I wanted to say, and urge you guys to retain it. So.
Thank you.
Sarah, before she walks off.
Oh, Sarah? We have a question from Commissioner
voice
Spivak.
above.
I've been intrigued by that property area near the Hollywood Transit Center where it sounds like you just spoke about.
Yes.
I understand from the summary that there's been a couple of people supporting the city to have the higher density zoning that already is there, and maybe one person opposed. I was actually kind of surprised that this area is zoned as low as it is, given that it's surrounded by CM1 and CM2 and so close to transit and amenities. I just wondered, I think the staff wrote in a comment to us that they're suggesting that they go to R1, if I'm reading this right. And I'm wondering whether it might make better sense to have that property, for some time down the road, be CM1 or CM2 to be more in line with the stuff around it, recognizing that that's not what's there today. And I'm curious what your thinking is on that property since you spoke on it.
Sure. I think that I don't have the map in front of me, but my understanding is that a lot of the commercial areas along the Sandy corridor and a lot of the stuff both to the east and southeast of us is residential and is not, and I think is even zoned residential without multi-unit, whatever zone that is. I'm sorry, I don't know the specifics, but so I think the way we looked at this is that putting it in R1 zone would allow kind of the more gradual transition from the single family zone to a multifamily zone and then to the commercial zone that's in along Sandy and in the Hollywood Central area.
Does that answer your question, Eli?
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next three are Joseph Schaefer, Rich Rogers, and Jessica Engman. They'll be followed by Stephen, sorry, I can't read the last name, but it's Process Consulting, Ann Pernickel, and Tad Everhart.
We're all together, and with your indulgence, I'll start. My name is Rich Rogers with Community Development Partners. We're a affordable housing development firm. We have a portfolio of over 1,200 units and with several hundred more in the pipeline, and we're doing a lot of work here in Portland now. One of our projects is comprised of 4 sites on Alberta between Mallory and 25th. We're calling it Alberta Alive. One of the properties within that is the subject of our request here, where we're asking for the parking lot across from the Alberta Abbey that we own to be rezoned to CM2. It's a couple blocks from MLK. It's 2.5 blocks from Vancouver Williams. It's right on Alberta. There's at least four different bus lines within a couple blocks. Without the CM2 zone, we can't get the development to be financially feasible, it would be, I think, perfectly responsive to the state of emergency for housing. And like I said, we think it'll be a positive addition to the community, allow us to build some family-sized units. So we'd appreciate your support for that change.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Ingeman, also here to talk about 126 Northeast Alberta, the Alberta Abbey. And I'm a historian, so my comments are particularly coming to you through the lens of the fact that I was asked to look at the historic significance of the Alberta Abbey, formerly the Mallory Avenue Christian Church, and to understand its history, because the synergy of that property and the vacant parking lot across the street that could be developed for affordable housing, I think is a unique one where they can work together, and that by allowing the development to occur on the parking lot will support the preservation of what I have determined to be a historically significant building. I do think it's eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. As a side note, you may be aware, but earlier this year, the city partnered with the Architectural Heritage Center to document Portland's African American historic resources, and this was part of an effort to implement a policy in the Central City 2035 plan, which calls for the identification and documentation of those resources in North and Northeast Portland. And based on the research that I've done, I believe that the Alberta Abbey is certainly one of those important buildings associated with African American history in Portland and deserves recognition and retention. So I think that this is a win-win, the potential to provide affordable housing across the street and have a building, a historic building that's preserved and is not only preserved because of what it's meant for the community, but that the fact that that sort of community use can continue there with programming that supports the residents in the affordable housing project. There's also been some conversations with a displaced Black church that's out in Rockwood that would be interested in returning to the Albina neighborhood. That I think for so many of our planning objectives, sustainability, affordability, preservation, equity, there are many reasons to support this request. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Joseph Schaefer, a land use planner on behalf of Community Development Partners, and want to speak to you briefly about the neighborhood context. This is an unusual kind of planning map. This is not a plan or a zone. This is what's actually on the ground out there. So we've got our site here is the red square, one across from the church, which is the green square, 126 Alberta. The pink is single family, the red is multifamily, the dark green is institutional, schools and churches, and the lighter green is commercial. We are essentially midway between MLK on the east and Williams on the west, and Alberta is the link. If you look at this reach of Alberta between these two streets, you see anchored with commercial on the corners and then kind of peppered with multi-family projects along the way. Currently, our parking lot is zoned R2.5, and we could fit 4 townhouses there. We think this site is much better situated for higher density housing. You heard earlier testimony from a woman about another neighborhood, how CM2 is designed and intended to relate nicely with residential uses around it. And so we ask again that you help us redevelop this parking lot for housing with a CM2 designation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question. No.
Sure.
You go first. So you're requesting this under this sort of the category of affordable housing, providing housing. Do you have a specific plan? Is there a proposal?
Yeah, we've looked at we've looked at a few different design options, but as I mentioned, this is part of a 4-property development along Alberta, 143 units combined. It's a partnership with the Black Parent Initiative. We're also working with Join to do some work to house homeless veterans on the project on 8th, and they'll also be active in helping us to get some folks with vouchers in and do some retention work. But we're looking at more family-sized units on this parcel and on the one on 25th, and then the parcels on 8th and 5th will be more studios and 1-bedrooms.
But you're developing it as some form of affordable housing?
100% affordable housing, yeah. We're using 4% LIHTC, so max 60% rents, and then anything we can do to bring that down with vouchers.
You already have your 4% in your,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, non-competitive, so.
I think you answered my question, but just, you're targeting to bring back African Americans to the community or retain them in the community through your housing project?
We're aligning this intentionally with the city's preference policy. I should have mentioned that. Which, as you know, is designed to give preference to people who have been displaced or are at risk of being displaced by gentrification.
Thank you. The next three are Stephen from Process Consulting, Anne, and I'm sorry about your last name. Okay, thank you. Tad Everhart, then Abby Tibbs, and they will be followed by Doug Klotz, Kakumio from the Zen Center, and Diana Davis.
Hi, folks. I'm not sure how you're able to absorb all this, but good luck. My name is Stephen Skadevoerder, and I'm going to talk about property 1510 Northeast 45th. I'm the owner of this property. The discussion, it's actually on the corner of 45th and Halsey. It's designated at the moment RH, and there's a downgrade of designation proposed to R1. And I have no idea about zoning, so I called the city and I thought, what does this mean? And what it essentially means is my property will be out of compliance. It's got 10 units, and I believe the square footage is a little over 9,000 square feet. Now, it's a really cute property. I got photographs here. You probably can't see them. It's a gorgeous property. It's well designed. It was built in 1939, and I could live there. And that was the standard of buying something when I bought it about 6 years ago. Not only would I be out of compliance, but my neighbor opposite would be out of compliance. So I thought, okay, there must be a strategy. So I spoke to the city and I thought, why are you downgrading these? And I really couldn't get a clear answer. I said, okay, let's look at the environment. Just up 45th, this isn't on Halsey, is this huge building. I believe it's low-income housing, but it's huge. Bad photograph, but it's the best I could get on Google today. I'll leave these for everyone. A huge building. Diagonally opposite is the healthcare center, Providence Health. Again, a huge building taking blocks. You've got 2 off-ramps from the freeways. You've got traffic lights at the corner of my property. It's right in the corner. Opposite is a tiny house, which will continue to be commercial zoning. So I look at the whole consistency of the plan, and I say, what exactly is the plan? Because essentially, when you downgrade my site and you put it out of compliance, I imagine there's a plan while Portland is developing in an incredibly busy neighborhood. Halsey is really busy, and I imagine it will only continue to be busier. Now, I'm all for design. I'm all for not crowding out the neighbors. I'm all for not making 10-story buildings. I'll be 3 more seconds. But it would be really nice if it was consistent. So I'm really hoping we can keep it at RH. That's my hope for this committee. Thank you.
Have you discussed your property with staff?
Yes, I discussed it. I didn't get any answers. They said I should come here and present it, and I presented something also on note. So I'll leave these photographs in case anyone is interested. And thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Abby Tibbs. Thanks for your time. I am here to testify about the buffer zone between St. Helens Road and the Willamette Heights neighborhood. I actually live on the buffer zone, and my interest is really, we chose to live in our house because it was close to the industrial zone, and we think that that residential neighborhood in Willamette Heights and the industrial zone have been able to really coexist, in large part because of that buffer zone. And my concern about removing the buffer zone is not only for some of the environmental concerns I think have been expressed, but because I think it's going to create additional pressure for the industrial area to be rezoned and become more residential or commercial, because I don't think that the cohabitation that's existed between the industrial industry and Willamette Heights will be able to continue, because I think there'll just be an exacerbation of some of the noise and environmental challenges that have arose through the sort of not so compatible sometimes existences between those two communities. So I really think there's a kind of a bigger public policy question about whether that buffer being removed will drive increased pressure to diversify the industrial area, which I think is doing a great job of providing living wage jobs and an economy that's important to keep in central Portland. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks for your service. My name is Tad Everhart. I'm a homeowner in a subdivision of 10 houses immediately west of 511 Southeast 60th, which is proposed change 1662. We're concerned and anxious about the proposed rezoning from R5 to CM1. What you need to know is that there's a steep hillside coming down from the site. Our neighborhood is roughly 2 stories below that site. So CM1 would allow a 3-story tall building. It wouldn't be compatible with our neighborhood. We're all 1- and 2-story homes. It could be essentially the equivalent of a 5-story building, and it would dwarf our houses. We're also concerned that if there's more intensive use on the site, it's going to be even more dangerous. The adjacent intersection is Southeast 60th and Stark, and it's already dangerous. It's at the crest of a hill, and there's misalignment of Southeast 60th, and there've been a number of accidents. Most recently, someone coming up the hill and driving right into the building that's on the site now. We wanted to make it clear to this group that we're not against affordable housing. Portland Housing Bureau owns the site, and we're actually enthusiastic about its plans to put affordable housing on the site. We think it's a wonderful use of the site. There's a lot of schools, good transportation, and we welcome affordable housing in our neighborhood. We just want it to be compatible so that we can continue to enjoy our homes. I have a letter from the president of our subdivision association, and I thank you for your service and your time.
Thank you. Okay, the next 3 are Doug Klotz, Kakumio, Diana Davis, to be followed by Daryl Garner, Ross Cornelius, and John Spencer.
Hi, my name is Doug Klotz. I'm going to talk about 4 different sites with the intention of seeing that we can get the growth in the places that the comp plan calls for. The first one is, as it turns out, the same one that the other previous fellow was talking about, which is at Halsey and 45th. That's the big map on the front. And I also have comments, but my comments were before the staff changed their recommendation. Right now, the dark blue site in the middle here is mostly RX. It's RX up to 45th, and then east of 45th, it's RH. And as you can see, the north of the site is all CM2. South of the site is CM3. West of the site is CM3. And north of the site, on the other side of 45th, there's RH. And then there's R1. So there's no single-family zoning within at least 2 blocks of this. It just makes the most sense to rezone this to match the sort of intensity that's there now. The reason this is because RX is theoretically not going to be used outside the central city, so staff looked for an equivalent, but they looked for steps down. RX is not allowed, so CM3 seems to be the closest equivalent to RX, and that would fit. There's most of the surrounding areas are CM3. It's right on a busy street. Halsey has tall buildings across the street. The site has 2 tall buildings on it. And the site, the section east of 45th, which is now RH, should remain RH and not go down to R1, as this fellow was talking about. So I would say CM3 west of 45th and RH east of 45th. Moving on, I have testimony about the site at the dead end of Southeast Main. This site has several, it's a 6-unit and a 5-unit building on it, and a 2-unit building. Ironically, it's split zoned R1 and R5, and the 6 and 5-unit buildings are in R5. I say the whole thing should be R1, but it could be R2 also and still be a step down and provide missing middle housing in line with what's already starting to develop there.
All right. My name is Courtney. I'm a resident of this site, representing Dharma Zen Center. It's a Buddhist temple. We've been here in Portland for 40 years – and coming out in support of the proposed split zone lot there. This site it's a 14-acre site, a former landfill. We bought it about 5 years ago. Before that, it was derelict for 30 years, very hard to develop. And what we've done is we've devoted a third of the site to native habitat, a third to community green space, and we're developing a third. So really trying to benefit the broader community. It's coming along well. We have several hundred visitors a day. The part of it which is not is a portion which was planned for multifamily residential. When we went through our land use review process, the hearings officer allowed us to do that as an accessory use to the temple. And it turns out, we were happy at the time, but it turns out that for conventional financing, that is a no-go because, as Alistair pointed out. And not getting financing for this portion of the site threatens the progress we've made on the rest of the development. So I'm advocating for a split zone lot, EG2, for the temple portion, and then a small 2-acre portion as R1. It wouldn't compromise the original intent of the original land use review. It fits right in with the surrounding neighborhood, which is all residential adjacent to that portion, and it would make the multifamily housing financeable. Thank you.
I hope you guys don't mind my sunglasses, but I have a concussion, so I have to wear this. So I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful. First, I want to thank Julie for being very friendly. I'm not sure who it is. I think this for making it very comfortable for me to share. Because it's new for me. I don't know about zoning much, but as I'm hearing more testimony, I'm getting a better understanding as a resident. The property I'm talking about, 7447-7449. It used to be the Felony Flats area over there, and there's a lot of crime on 82nd, Floodvale, that area. And right now I'm looking at my neighbors, three property over north. They're all EG2. I'm the only one that's duplex, and we're on a busy street on top of that. So I just want to be consistent with my neighbors, because this past summer, I get to know the whole block. We threw a neighborhood block party, and it was really fun. And if they're all zone EG2, eventually if they leave, I don't want to be stuck there. So if I could, and I'm thinking what all these testimony has been saying about affordable housing, consistent with the neighborhood, we have a max line on Floodvale and down near the 205. It's rarely used. I use public transportation quite a bit to alleviate traffic. In Portland, it's gotten worse. Traffic now starts at 1 instead of 5. So I take the max, and it takes me an hour to get downtown. But when I get off on Floodvale, there's bicycle Springwater corridor there. There's bus line going along Floodvale and 82nd. With its zoning as the duplex, it's harder to live with the noise and all that, and making the neighborhood safer and more friendly, inviting. And now that I'm here, originally I asked for EG2 to be consistent with the other neighbors, which is 2 property over north. If we can do CM in the whole area, Floodvale down, it actually would help the whole neighborhood. So it's not just for me, but if neighborhoods are eventually able to redevelop or whatever, where there's business on the bottom, people are walking the neighborhood, it's safer, first of all. There's less stabbing, crimes, because it's notorious, that whole intersection, if you check on the map about crimes. There's bicyclists that got killed, ran over, the 7-Eleven with the stabbing, all that stuff, and prostitution. So if we can have more people involved in the neighborhood and change that CM straight down Floodvale, not on the quiet street, but on the busy street, that would help with the crime, the transportation in the long run, because 2020, we're expecting to have Portland population grow also. So if we can get people on the max line, bus line, all that living, that would be great. If it's okay.
Your time is up.
Thank you. So the second part, do I get 2 minutes for the second property?
You don't, I'm sorry.
Bummer.
Come back.
When's the next time? Because I just found out about this 2 days ago, last week.
Okay, we'll find it.
We'll
We'll find it.
The other one's on Foster. It's also with affordable housing, because it's a crazy little sliver that you cannot build anything, and it has a split zoning. So I want you to look into that, if we can do it consistent to the left. And I wrote about that on the email.
Okay, we'll look for your written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quickly, Chris, I'm sorry, where's the property you were speaking about?
8500 Northeast Siskiyou. So it's right at
Siskiyou
the
one.
base of Rocky View.
Yeah, okay.
Across from
And
Madison Heights.
last comment, Doug, I hope you're going to come back on code reconciliation, because I liked your letter.
Okay, thank you. The next 3 are Daryl Garner, Ross Cornelius, John Spencer. They will be followed by Stu Smucker, Joshua Dean, and Jane Beebe.
Good evening. I'm Daryl Garner. I'm here on behalf of Vancouver Avenue Holdings, LLC. I'm here under the policy priority map change for affordable housing. We have this site, I represent a client that owns the property, 29,000 square feet of vacant land in the corner of Vancouver and Skidmore. It's currently zoned R2.5. We're here respectfully requesting a change to CM2. We're not going to be greedy and ask for CM3. We're going to play it safe and ask for CM2, not to cause much heartburn. Under policy 5.10, affordable housing talks about an inclusive community, enhanced housing choices for folks in protected classes. The owners of this group, they've been in this neighborhood for over 50 years. It's an African-American group who they have a history of renting to low-income folks and have years of experience renting to Section 8 tenants. So, and by definition, the size of the property requires inclusionary housing because it will be more than 20 units. So it'll definitely be affordable. It supports the comprehensive plan in that it focuses on focused growth, systems of centers and corridors, housing diversity, healthy connected city, and the business district vitality with the mixed use with the retail on the bottom. The property faces Vancouver Avenue. There's a big church that's probably about 50 or 60 feet tall. There is a fourplex or a triplex directly next to that, which is probably about 40, 45 feet tall. Diagonal across the street, kitty corner, is a 5-story EXD property that will change to CM3. And then on Skidmore, facing Skidmore, there's a fourplex. And on Gantenbein, there are 2 houses, but they're shaded by a huge tree canopy, and the trees are probably 60, maybe 50 to 60 feet tall. So the impact would be minimal. And with the step downs at 35 feet close to property lines and facing residential property, the impact of the CM2 designation would definitely be mitigated. So we ask that the property be added as a CM2. If not now, please direct the staff to consider it in the future, in this process in the future. There will be no displacement, and by definition, again, affordable housing will be included.
My name is Ross Cornelius. I'm here representing Trinity Episcopal Cathedral at 147 Northwest 19th Avenue in Northwest Portland. Trinity has been in the neighborhood since 1906 and currently serves a congregation of about 1,800 families. We are parking constrained. Trinity owns its own campus parcel at 147 Northwest 19th, and then a parcel to the west and a parcel to the south, and then a half block across the street on 19th. All of the parcels are zoned RH. We have been spending the last couple of years trying to figure out how to accommodate the parking demand that we have during our services under the RH zone. We've looked at a whole variety of different housing uses, talked to different housing developers. We've looked at other uses within the RH zone and have not been able to come up with a way to adequately increase the parking capacity that we need under the current zoning. We've also spent quite a bit of time talking to the neighboring institutions, which include St. Mary's Cathedral and School, Temple Beth Israel, the Children's Theater and Northwest Cultural Center, as well as Trinity and the Metropolitan Learning Center, who are all institutions located at the southeast part of the Northwest District Association, and have been hearing from them that they also have a parking constraint. And so we're all beginning to talk about what it would take to put together a modest parking garage on the half block that we own across the street from the cathedral. So we're here to ask for a change in the current RH zone for that one parcel so that we can explore more mixed use and shared parking arrangements on the parcel that would help the financial feasibility of the project.
My name's John Spencer. I'm also here representing Trinity, and you should hopefully have a letter in your packet that we develop that has a lot of information and gives you some explanation of the thinking that Trinity has been going through and really how we've sort of landed on the idea of a mixed-use project that would include parking and would also include medical office or some other sort of office use in the same building so that we would kind of maximize the sharing opportunity of for that parking so the office users could use it during the weekdays. They wouldn't need it during the weekends when Trinity would need it. And that's really the primary reason why the RH zone doesn't work, because it doesn't allow that sort of office use that we really need to make that parking structure work. We're asking for a CM3 zone. There's a table in the letter that we provided that sort of compares the development standards between the RH and CM3. Basically, there's less FAR allowed in the CM3 compared to the RH, and the CM3 allows 65 feet building heights. The RH allows 75 feet building height. So it isn't. We're not asking for a zone change that would really require a lot more building mass. The other map amendment that we're recommending in the Northwest Plan District, there's a provision for a Northwest Master Plan. Right now, it only applies to the Conway property, and there was a master plan that was prepared for Conway. We're proposing that all of the Trinity properties also be shown on that for that master plan requirement in the Northwest District. And the reason is because this property, this site is very sensitive to the cathedral. There's a lot of design issues that are going to come up, and we think we can resolve that in a master planning process and work closely with the neighborhood to do it.
Okay.
A couple questions.
Sure, Jeff, and then I have one.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Daryl Garner.
Is there a proposal to build affordable housing, or is this just an idea?
No, it's more than an idea. This presentation just came about at the 11th hour, but we're very familiar with the city's policies and some of the Portland Housing Bureau programs. And again, our affordable housing is more organic. I mean, Section 8 tenants are just as needy as anybody else. And so we've never had to have constraints or rules that tell us, to rent to different people. We've done that for years and years and years. So to answer your question, it's more than just a notion, but we're not there yet because this is all new.
Okay. What's the current zoning?
R2.5.
Okay. If I may switch briefly to the Trinity team, very intrigued by this, and I hope there's a way to help you guys move it forward. We'll have to talk to staff because I'm not quite sure if what you're asking fits within sort of the parameters for this legislative change, but hopefully we can figure out a way to not put you through the burden of any kind of a quasi-judicial change and see if we can figure out a way. Because I know the area, it sounds like what you're trying to do is exactly what's needed. So when we...
And I'm with these
Thank
guys,
you.
too.
What?
I'm with these guys. I want the same answer.
Well, that may be. That may be.
Come as a package.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh,
Yeah, I have another question.
sorry.
Also for Daryl, I was wondering the name of your organization.
Vancouver Avenue Holdings.
I have just
Sure, Andre.
quick question. For the Trinity Group, so I get you're looking at a parking lot and you're looking at the parking. So have you done any TDM before you get to a parking lot and work with your neighbors around TDM?
We currently serve about 20 zip codes within the area, and the lots are jammed. We think we've got about 120 to 130 people parking on the streets at this point. We think we got a mode split of 90% automobile with 2 people per auto, and everybody else is coming either by pedestrian, bike, or transit. So we've looked at it. We haven't come up with any solutions that solve the problem. We might be able to marginally impact the parking, but we don't think we can solve our need by doing that.
The only reason I say that is you're looking at a plan district, and my recollection of the plan districts are you have to have a TDM and you have to meet certain goals. So
We'd certainly incorporate that.
Well, it's not an incorporation, it's a requirement. And all I'm concerned is that you're asking for something in terms of parking, and as you know, the city of Portland's not a parking fan, so I'm concerned about granting something or considering that granting around without some other transportation solutions first, and you and your neighbors, and I'm just seeing that.
Well, I think one of the requirements that the master plan includes is you've got to do a transportation analysis to show how all this is going to work. So that's another reason why we proposed a master plan requirement. I think that in this part of the neighborhood, in this sort of the northwest, as Ross mentioned, I mean, Trinity is just one of about 3 or 4 major religious institutions. And between Trinity and St. Mary's, there's probably 2 or 3 acres of surface parking lots in the neighborhood that are serving those institutions right now. I think one of the strategies that we've all been talking about is let's find a place to stack the parking, which is actually going to make development available for the other parking lots that Trinity owns back of it to the west and to the south. And I think that same strategy could apply to certainly to St. Mary's and some of the other institutions there. So the idea that some parking that will serve the needs of these regional institutions that are drawing people from 25 zip codes, solving the problem, the parking problem there is going to, I think, have the capacity to really increase future development and redevelopment of a lot of the surface parking lots that are owned by all these institutions now.
Just one last question. Have you reached out to PBOT on your parking problem? Department of Transportation, Bureau of Transportation.
We've been working with the Planning and Sustainability Commission staff as a first step. We have not talked yet to PBOT.
All right, thank
So,
you.
speaking as the past transportation chair for that neighborhood, I assume you've looked at the parking plan for the neighborhood, because that allows some considerable rights for accessory parking to be used in creative ways. We also heard testimony from St. Mary's during a prior planning process that they have development intentions for their parking lot. So, are you talking with them at all to coordinate plans? Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay, the next 3 are Stu Smucker, Josh Nandine, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, Jane Beebe. They will be followed by Patrick Burke, Ross Kelly, Laura Bender, and that's the last card I have. So if anyone else wishes to testify, please fill out a card and get it to Julie. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stu Smucker. I own a residential lot that abuts an industrial property with a buffer. I'm here to testify against removal of the buffer on the industrial property located at 2425 Northwest St. Helens Road. Before 1991, the St. Helens Road property was zoned heavy industrial. In 1991, an amendment was passed reclassifying that property as General Industrial 1B. That amendment was in the direction of more, not less, restriction on the St. Helens Road property. Section 33.140.010 of the Portland Zoning Code provides the general purpose of Portland's zoning regulations. One of the purposes is to provide certainty to property owners, developers, and neighbors about the limits of what is allowed on neighboring property. In other words, the zoning regulations are intended to provide residential neighbors like me with certainty about the uses of the abutting industrial property. It provides families with certainty in assessing whether or not a particular residential lot meets their and their children's health, safety, and environmental concerns, whether or not the purchase will be a good long-term investment. Section 33.410.010 of the Portland Zoning Code provides a specific purpose for a buffer and when it should be used. It is to provide additional buffering between non-residential and residential zones. It is used when the base zone standards do not provide adequate separation between residential and non-residential uses. In the case of the St. Helens Road property, it's my understanding that in 1991, it was determined that the base zone standards did not provide adequate separation. Because there was inadequate separation, the buffer was applied. The inadequacy of the separation continues to this date. As such, the underlying reason for the buffer continues to the present. The local Portland file number for that 1991 case was 91-00106ZC. The DLCD file number was 018-91. The adoption date was 5/2/91. I request that that file become part of the record in this hearing. In 1991, it was noted that the St. Helens Road property had and still has some unique qualities.
Okay, if you could wrap up, please.
In sum, I would say that removing the buffer that protects the neighboring property values would reverse a trend established in 1991. It would undermine the original purpose of the buffer itself to place additional buffering between non-residential and residential zones in cases where the base zone standards do not provide adequate separation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joshua Daniel Din, and I'm here on behalf of my neighborhood on, first of all, my address is 6703 Southeast 83rd Avenue. I came to give testimony of appreciation and for all these panels and the city of Portland for reverting from what was originally was R1 residential. It changed to industrial ME for the last 2.5 years, I think around 2 years. I went to 3 of these city panels, and this is my 4th. And I just want to say I appreciate your insight and wisdom to listen to the small voice of the people and meeting our needs and reverting back to residential 1. I really appreciate it. And I want to give a shout out to the City of Portland BPS staff, Stephen Kuntz and Sarah Wrights. They were very helpful for me in this process. I just want to say thank you for reviewing and just maintaining it as residential. Every one of my neighborhood is very appreciative. We're all in prayers, and I just want to shout out to them. And I just want to say this came a day after my birthday. So I thank you, Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Jane Beebe, and I'm a longtime resident of Willamette Heights. And recognizing the importance of close-in industrial capacity, the jobs and the products that result, and also the importance of living in a nice neighborhood. The buffer provides both those things. So I'm just reiterating what everybody else is saying. I hope you retain the buffer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the last 3 that I have are Patrick Burke, Ross Kelly, and Laura Bender. And again, if anyone else wants to testify, now is your last chance to fill out a testimony card. Patrick, go ahead.
Okay. So I just I want to discuss my opposition to the rezoning of the property at 6920 Southeast 52nd to CM1 for a few reasons. I believe the city of Portland has mischaracterized the views of me and eight of my neighbors, including myself, where they said that we may not be aware that zoning may change over time. I think what we're not aware of is that you'd want to change zoning on a property like this over time. The property has a long history of adverse impacts on the community as a tavern. This is I submitted with my testimony the OLCC evidence of that going back throughout the 80s until eventually the property was forced to close at 11 o'clock due partially to zoning. That could be lifted now. I also want to point out that some of the city's reasons for changing the zoning, I think, are inadequate. First, the city mentions policy 6.69, non-conforming neighborhood business uses. It goes on to mention that in here that's described as one of the purposes of is to limit non-conformant uses from having adverse impacts on nearby residential uses. The city then goes on to say, well, its reason for this is that that the 3 other corners in this intersection are commercial. That is not true. They are mixed use. And residential uses in that thing is lowercase. Residential uses are allowed in those commercial zones, and the people who live in those zones, just because they're mixed use, have the same right to be protected by 6.69 as anybody who lives in the houses nearby. Secondly, I'd also like to mention that all the other properties on this block face are R5, and they're staying R5. That means they're not the ones across the street, but on 52nd, on the main road. So, and additionally, the city, the neighborhood association has recommended that the CR zone be applied to this site. So the city has been very lenient in its interpretation of 6.69, but it has been extraordinarily strict in saying how the CR zone should be applied. It's found all these reasons CR wouldn't fit, but here's the thing. It stands to reason that at this particular, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought here, but I include in my testimony several reasons why the CR zone should be applied. Also, so that should be enough there. Read my written testimony. And secondly, I'd just like to say that I'm only opposed to this because of the noise presented by the tavern. So I think of many of my neighbors. And 6920 Southeast 52nd Avenue.
What's the intersection?
It's at Bybee and 52nd.
Hi there. Thanks for allowing me to speak. My name is Ross Kelly. I'm the owner of 5216 Southeast 17th Avenue, and I'm in support of map change number 1658, which will retain the RH zoning for the properties directly to the east of me. Those are 5205 Southeast 18th and 5209 Southeast Avenue. My property will be rezoned from RH to R1. I'm requesting that my property, along with my neighbor to the north, which is 5206 Southeast 17, remain in the RH zone for a couple reasons. First, my house sits right near the corner of the busy intersection of McLaughlin and Southeast 17th. Southeast 17th is a main service street. We heard testimony that this area doesn't have a lot of public transportation. As an owner that lives nearby, I can testify that it does. We've got a bus stop about 100 feet from me and a MAX station about 0.3 miles from me. Second, I think the general flow that the city likes is commercial to high residential to residential. The lots above me are all changing to CE. And then the lots directly to my east are now going to be RH. So the flow, if you change my house and the lot to my north, would go from commercial to high residential down to residential, which I think is a much more natural flow. The two lots directly to my east are currently in the permit stage. They are to be a 59-unit, 6-story building on a 10,000 square foot lot. I just think it's a pattern and uniformity to go from commercial to high residential down to residential. So yeah, that is mine. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura Bender. My husband and I live at 330 Southeast 52nd Avenue, neighboring the split zone property of 344 Southeast 52nd, which is change number 1646. We have submitted email testimony, but also wanted to take part in this verbal exchange. I'm here tonight to defend something that is very valuable to me and my husband, as it has been a fulfillment of a 30-year dream. We are both visual artists and collaborate in making art for public places. In 1993, we moved to Portland in search of our creative home. We've received much of Portlandia's outstretched hand and have given back our art as installations in schools, hospitals, community centers, and transit facilities. We bought our first and only house in 2000, and in 2014, built our backyard studio. 30 years in the making, spacious, light-filled, quiet, peacefully sited in the garden, and durable and energy efficient. It is our studio, and it is also an asset to the neighborhood, providing workshops, exhibitions, house concerts. Change number 1646 would degrade or destroy the values we've designed into our studio and home. Bringing R2 zoning to our property line would allow several 40-foot high structures, much higher than any buildings on this block, to overshadow our studio, wiping out its planned use for solar collection panels, which we are told would provide all of our power needs. The privacy and quiet of our backyard will be ended, and our flower and food gardens compromised by loss of direct light from the south. further off-street parking spaces will bring sounds of traffic into our space. We have seen similar arrangements that have sprung up in Southeast with bright security lights flooding parked cars and buildings, which would include our property. And last but not least, the 2 mature trees that are on the side of our property, whose crowns extend over both lots, would be imperiled, as well as the stately walnut tree in our neighbor's lot.
Okay, if you could wrap up.
We ask you not to change the existing split zone of 344 Southeast 52nd or to make it all R5. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I have 2 more. Howard Thurston and Linda Powers Taylor. If there's anyone else, please get a card to Julie ASAP.
Good evening. I'm Howard Thurston. I live at 4341 Northeast Halsey Street in the Rosegate condominiums. The proposal as it stands now is to change the zoning from RX to R1, which we do indeed support. However, we would offer the possibility that if RH were to be the new zoning designation, we would request an FAR of 2 to 1 rather than 4 to 1, if that would be the direction that the council chooses to go. The rationale is basically sunlight. We have the Providence office building across the street from us now, which is nominally 6 floors. It's more like 8, and so we're in permanent shade during the winter months. We have the Portland Housing Authority around the corner, a large building. We are one of 3 small developments on Northeast Halsey Street from 45th west. And so the character of the neighborhood at the moment, at least on our side of the block, is small, multifamily, residential construction. We would prefer to keep it that way and to maintain as much access to sunlight and the sky as we can. So again, R1 we support, RH we would support with an FAR of 2 to 1 maximum. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hadn't actually planned on speaking tonight, so I'll try to be quick. My name is Linda Powers Taylor. I work with Lansfield Realty. I'm representing Elizabeth Taylor, my mother-in-law, in the purchase of 6920 Southeast 52nd, currently known as Area 52 Bar and Grill, and the duplex and studio apartment that is attached to it. We were told in this purchase process that we are hopefully going to be closing within the month, that it will be changed to R1 or R2 zoning. And we're basically here just for information gathering. We weren't quite sure where that was going to head. Living in that neighborhood, personally, I live on Malden, which is about 5 blocks away. That, as it currently sits, is kind of a neighborhood eyesore. The zoning change does allow for it to be what it's doing, its highest and best use. It's been a neighborhood bar for 50 years. We'd like to keep it a neighborhood bar. I would like to make it look a little nicer. I would like to maybe enclose it with some trees so those noise problems won't be such a big deal. You know, the staying open till 2 a.m. isn't exactly a plan. I don't mind closing early. It's the fact that the current zoning just doesn't allow us to improve the property whatsoever. So the newer zoning will actually allow us to put some trees around the front, maybe put a patio out front so that it's a little more neighborhood friendly and make it less of an eyesore and more of like a neighborhood attraction that people that live there actually want to go to. And that zoning will allow that to happen. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Last call. Anyone else who would like to testify on the map reconciliation project? Seeing none, I am closing the hearing on the map reconciliation project. Marty, would you come back up? So let's talk about next steps. I would propose to keep the written record open through 5 p.m. this Friday. That works for you?
Works
Okay.
for me.
So if anyone wants to provide written commentary on what you heard tonight, you have a few more days to do that. We will close the written record at 5 p.m. On Friday. I would propose to do a quick round the table to get initial reactions from commissioners. I think we will give you until next Tuesday at 5 p.m. to get any comments, issues, questions to staff to bring back to us for work session. Marty, anything else you want to say before we go around the table?
No, I'm just, again, very appreciative of the turnout and the thoughtful testimony this evening.
All right. Why don't we start with you, Jeff?
Well, I got lost because I was trying to figure out where people's property concerns are in the numbering system. So I got a couple of one sort of process. I don't know if it's fair to ask you to do a matrix on everything we heard, or that would be great if you could, and just cite to a number, or if it's not a proposed change, just somehow help us classify and at least begin to understand.
Jeff, that would be very easy in the meeting minutes to have the corresponding map change number, if applicable, alongside the testimony. Very easy to do.
Okay, and then where it's not, just maybe a brief commentary on, do you see a way to fit it in, or do you think it's too far outside the scope? And that'll at least start. I mean, there are a lot of issues, and I'm hesitant to start picking and choosing. I think there's some obvious ones. Understanding the buffer a little bit better. Is there a way to address their concern? I'm not going to go beyond that. The other one that I continue to have questions about, and I think I'll help me understand, is what we're doing in that Westmoreland, Southeast 17th. We heard a couple of different takes on it. And again, my concern is, and this may be, you'll recommend it's beyond our scope, and I'm willing to hear that. If we're in effect, we're spot zoning throughout that entire neighborhood, because there's been a lot of development at the RH level that's being downzoned to R1, and yet now we're proposing to pick those spots and rezone it back up to RH. And I'm just wondering whether that's the right way to approach it, or whether there's another way to think through what really works in that neighborhood. So help us think through if there's some other options rather than the spot zoning. I'm going to stop there. There are obviously several sites that got a lot of testimony that we'll want to sort of understand get your input and recommendation on what are some options, how to think these through. So.
Katie?
Yeah, I have some things. I was reading the testimony earlier today, and there was one on 520 North 76. And I didn't hear anybody testify on it, but I do want to hear more about that. And I want to know more about the buffer, because they're very consistent in what's said, and also there was just something about having worked out a very workable solution that they love, and then have it taken away. Don't like that. If that's in the case. Always just you, I wanted to know more about that. Because consistent with hearing, they don't want parking lots at risk. And so I want to know what you do about that. I agree with the historical traffic stuff. There were a couple people who wrote in about self-storage, and I wanted to find out more about that, because it does seem like just I know people own those businesses, and there's nothing wrong with them per se, but in terms of the neighborhood element, they don't seem like a big element. And then maybe a little more about the Trinity. Those are the things that come back.
Andres?
So I think we're beginning to see some themes. I also, the self-storage question jumped out at me, as well as Markham Hill and parking. There seemed to be a lot of comment on downzoning in Hollywood, so I'd just be curious to hear a broad rationale around that. I wanted to boost something I saw the land use chair in St. John's, Rachel Hill, mentioned the Amazon distribution center and how that interfaced with the St. John's truck plan. Asked for follow-up information on that, and I know there's a conversation about freight earlier today, so I wanted to loop back on that. And then also interested in the buffer zone. The tofu testimony also interested me. I thought it was interesting because I wasn't sure if it would relate to Eli's interest in live-work zones and how we can be more flexible around that. I think a larger concern, or not concern, something that was worthy of attention, I thought, were the requests around affordable housing, and I don't know how it would be done, but trying to assess the viability or feasibility of the affordable housing suggestions for changes, to try to consider how realistic these ideas are for affordable housing in areas that are requesting zoning changes. And then I think the biggest thing was I came onto the commission after the comprehensive plan, but there were a number of different testimonies that dealt with upzoning, and particularly upzoning areas that were residential that are currently affordable, not by subsidy or any program, but simply by the fact that it is older or smaller housing that exists there now, and concern around how upzoning can lead to displacement in those areas. I came to zoning from Vancouver, BC, and there in a suburb in Burnaby, they upzoned a huge swath of area that were old walk-up apartment buildings, and the max zoning allowed for condo-style development, and they systematically cleared about 7 blocks there to make way for condos, and there wasn't other housing that was in that range in the city. And so I think that I always have a hesitation. I think it's important to have density, but the concern of what happens when you have density that doesn't consider the displacement effect it has, especially on older housing stock. So I'd be really interested in some sort of displacement assessment or study to consider how upzoning is affecting existing residential stock that might be affordable, just through age, if nothing else. Some of the properties that jumped out there was 4337 on Prescott, 2438 on Main, and I think 405 on Fremont, but I don't know a lot of the specific properties' history, so I hesitate to have an opinion on that. But I am interested in hearing staff's perspective on what effect the upzoning could have on displacement, and kind of see some process to considering that before changing the upzoning, changing the zone to be more dense.
Thank you. Andre?
I'll be quick. I think the properties on Fremont, the Hollywood district, someone's already mentioned. I think parking policy, I look at Trinity, I look at Markham Hill. The Northwest District, I know, has a lot of work around parking, so I don't want to go into that. But I would like to understand kind of, and I guess remind us, what is our parking policy, generally speaking, and direction, and then look at specifically those areas. The bar on 52nd, the 52nd Street property, I am sympathetic to the noise issue and the disruption that that type of facility. So I would be interested in the police department's view of that property. And my prior work, the police usually have a view of properties like that. And what are the alternatives that can keep some of the conditions that are probably pretty hard fought around the 11 o'clock and some other conditions around that bar that could move that forward. And the other one is everybody came up and said they're going to do affordable housing. I just, and I mean, it just tugs at your heart, and yep, you're all for it. Okay. And I'm for it, but
who's really got the opportunity to do affordable housing, and how much can they do, and so how much are we going to get as a bonus, and who's just tugging at our heart here because it's the hot new subject and we have an emergency. And I just want to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and look at those properties if we can in a broad view and say, you know, this zone change is going to get us 2 more properties or 2 more potential, or we're going to get 50. And, you know, someone pointed out you already have inclusionary zoning occurring on that property. So what do we get in a bonus from that standpoint? Because I get everybody wants their zone change, but affordable housing, for affordable housing's sake, is just not a good reason, in my view.
Thank you. Teresa?
Well, I think everyone covered most of the property concerns. Troyer Plaza, Trinity, the Temple, just helping them through some of the parking issues, and also a better understanding of the buffer zone, what that will and won't do with the change. But then lastly, one thing I heard bothered me, and that was not getting adequate notice of the change. And I know we struggle with that a little bit. I know we have some mail outs, and I don't know, you guys maybe think about it a little bit and make sure if you feel like we're doing an adequate job in the way we're communicating, because this is the most important thing for people to know, is when we're affecting where they live.
Eli, are you still with us?
Sorry, I am still here. Can you hear me?
All right. You are a very patient man. What do you have to say?
I have 2 thoughts. One is getting to the Halsey and the 48 kind of area. I think we heard a few people comment on that. And I look back at the map and see that it is, I think that there's some really lovely buildings right there existing, but they're also quite low density. My instinct, I would like the city to look at that piece again. My instinct is that it may be CM3 zoning for that spot, given the level of amenity around it. And my other instinct on that is that given the quality of the buildings there, they're probably going to be there a long time. But if it ever does get redeveloped, it seems like higher density would make sense for that spot. And the other question piggybacks on what Andre Baugh was speaking about earlier. I personally went through a zone change from R5 to R3 through a quasi-judicial process, and there was a condition of approval, and I committed to some affordable housing, and the condition of approval said that I must do some affordable housing on it. And that might be one way of addressing some of these requests for affordable housing, where I guess I'd have to ask staff whether that's an option. I think that going through this code process, the map refinement project, is a swift and inexpensive way of getting some change to zoning, and we need affordable housing swiftly. But it also could be a swift way to upzone property, and then if it turned out that property got sold, you know, in 6 months for more than it otherwise would have been sold, or whether it's from a nonprofit or a for-profit, it wouldn't matter. That wouldn't be achieving the goals here. And so there might be, I'm guessing that some of these properties, some of them may perhaps should be upzoned anyway, but if the upzoning is really done to achieve affordable housing goals beyond what inclusionary housing would require, then I wonder whether the city might consider placing recording something against that property, basically saying that, and you will do affordable housing on it, so that we get that benefit that that was one of the motivations for making this change, or allow the project to go through the traditional quasi-judicial process, which that same issue might arise anyway. So I'm wondering, I guess, as staff looks at this, if that's a tool that might be available. If someone's intent fully is a nonprofit-owned property or city-owned property or for-profit-owned property, and their intent is to make affordable housing out of it, then they'll say, sure, put the condition on there, we're going forward. If they're not so sure about it, then, and we wouldn't have provided that zoning update anyway, then maybe we should not be so sure about it either. Thanks.
So I have a few. It seems to me that we had a whole category of testimony that really arose out of our desire to restrict RX, EX, and CX to the central city, and we're trying to find the next best zone, and the next best zone isn't particularly good for the people who have the property, who were perfectly happy when they had the X zone. And, I know council has already made some exceptions and kept some EX outside the central city. Are we just making more trouble for ourselves than it's worth, trying to achieve some ideal of only using these zones in certain places? I'd ask that broad question. Is it worth the pain we're creating? I'd echo the comments that have been made that more commercial parking on Markham Hill is probably not consistent with a lot of our other policies, and we need to look at that. Wasn't brought up in written or in verbal testimony tonight, but the written testimony, there was comment about the Pepsi site on Sandy that probably needs some examination. I'll echo the comments that the Trinity proposal needs a lot of thought in a lot of different directions. Self-storage, I was unclear if that was a map issue or a code issue or both. So I think we might hear about it again in the next hearing. And the two properties on Fremont, the sort of idea of preservation of affordable housing there, whether there's any possibility of that or if that needs different tools than zoning to achieve. I thought it was interesting that we removed the buffer everywhere in the city, and we only heard about one site where people had an issue, which suggests that we need to give some thought to that one site and what's going on there. And then finally, the gentleman who testified about the 52nd and Bybee, I mean, from his description, sounded awful like why exactly we created the CR zone, so why aren't we using it? I'm curious to know what the staff rationale on that is. Okay, Marty, anything else you need from us tonight?
No, but I just wanted to talk about some process, some next steps. And there may be some further conversation on that, so nothing I say is set in stone for sure. My understanding is that we're going to come back to the November 14th for PSC meeting for a work session. And we can kind of see how far we get through all the items that you've identified for staff to report back to you. And then I think there's some thought on whether or not we would need to continue to either the November 28th meeting or the December 12th meeting. And so that is about the duration of time we're going to slog through this together and get to a recommendation. So that's just, I'm stating this for both those around the table and then those in the audience as well. Those work sessions are obviously public meetings and we welcome folks to come back, but the in-person testimony has now closed.
Right. Katie?
I can say there's people that come and testify and it's like about one house in one place and nobody else is, you don't get 3 or 4 people testifying in it. And I want to make sure that those things get looked at. And because, they're very important, but they just don't have massive appeal.
Yep. I think staff looks at every single piece of testimony and evaluates it.
Thank you. I think that's important to say because some of you are out there. You came in to talk about one thing and you want to know that somebody's going to look at it again.
Jeff, did you have something else?
Just a quick process question. If the comp plan that we're now refining is not going to take effect until May, presumably, would this package then wait for May anyways? And I guess I'm asking, is there a little time to, not that we don't want to wrap it up as quickly as possible, is there a deadline on this? Or is there any reason whatever we do is not going to take effect till after May anyway, or am I misunderstanding the process?
That's correct. We still do have to go to city council though, and that'll take a few minutes.
I didn't know if there was a specific deadline in terms of.
I think we're comfortable with this process wrapping up in this calendar year. And
no, I mean, I'm not saying, I was more asking for education purposes.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we stall it out. I just wanted to understand that's the same deadline for this process.
Yeah.
But that is, again, a good clarification, Jeff, for the audience, is that the map refinement project is a post-acknowledgement planning effort. We are still waiting for the 2035 comprehensive plan to be acknowledged at the state of Oregon through the Department of Land Conservation Development. So any of these map changes, if they go through adoption at City Council in the winter, spring 2018, would not become effective until after the acknowledgement of the 2035 comp plan, which right now we're looking at later in the spring.
Yeah, I
So-
think in my director's report, I said May 23rd was the date that
Okay.
we're targeting for that right now. And that could change further depending on what happens at the state, but that's the plan.
And I guess just to clarify for everyone's benefit, so there are a category of changes that are being proposed that are directly based on actions the city council's already taken. So our ability to change that is limited. So
We have bumpers around this project.
yeah, so that will be as part of the subsequent memos that staff's going to put out. There will be a clear list of, sorry, we really couldn't help you even if we wanted to, but city council's already made a decision on an issue. So
But I think that while I agree with those buffers and trying to kind of retain the scope, there may be a cover letter or transmittal letter that the Planning Sustainability Commission, transmits with the recommendation to City Council that there needs to be a relook at certain testimony that you've received that you may or may not be able to take action on.
Okay.
fair enough.
All right, so final reminder for members of the public, if you want to comment on anything you heard tonight, you have until Friday at 5 p.m. to submit written testimony. And members of the commission, after you've read that testimony, if you want to add anything to the questions to staff, you have until Tuesday at 5 p.m. to do that. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Marty. Commissioner Spivak, are you going to be able to stay with us to the end? I think we're going to need you to continue quorum.
We can't lose Katie and we can't lose two people right now.
Who's Eli?
You looking at me? Yeah, are you? No. I'm in my way.
Leaving.
No, I'm just kind of ready.
Okay.
We'd like to leave.
All right. Thank you, Eli. We're going to need you. Oh, you're good.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, Barry, come on up.
Yes, thank you. I had to think a moment. What am I doing tomorrow? Yes.
Okay. For everyone here for code reconciliation, I appreciate your patience. We're going to get right to it.
Are we ready to go?
Go.
Okay, so Barry Manning, BPS staff, project manager for the Code Reconciliation Project. We're here tonight to have a public hearing on the project, which you all received about 3 weeks ago or more, and it's been out in the public for a similar amount of time. We had a briefing on this on October 10th, and I went through a lengthy slideshow there. I had a similarly long one here, but I'm not going to go through that in the interest of time. But I do want to just introduce it really quickly to remind folks why we're doing the project. You could just go to the next slide, Julie. Okay. Again, we're aiming to reconcile current zoning and other city codes with the recently adopted regulations. Many of the implementation amendments for the 2035 comp plan, which included the mixed-use zones, campus institutional zones, employment and industrial zoning project, and the inclusionary housing project that wasn't part of the comp plan project, but also is in effect now and needs to be kind of sorted out with the new zones that were adopted prior to inclusionary housing. So that's really the major intent of what we're trying to do. We had identified a long list of zones within Title 33 and other city titles where we need to make adjustments. So this is largely a technical exercise to make some code reference changes and clean up redundancies and fine-tune the code, but we have stumbled into some more significant issues of policy and development allowances along the way because of the magnitude of zone changes. What's affected, next slide, reminding folks that it's a largely Title 33. The majority of the document are Title 33 zoning code amendments, but we also have amendments to Title 11 trees, Title 11 noise control, and Title 32 signs and related regulations because they all reference different zones that have been affected by the comp plan. Next slide, please. In addition to the Planning and Sustainability Commission, we're going to a couple other review bodies for the benefit of the commission and the folks in the audience. The Planning and Sustainability Commission has purview and will hear your testimony and make recommendations on Title 33 zoning code issues, Title 11, the tree code issues as they relate to development, and Title 32, which is signs and related regulations. We also are going to be heading to the Urban Forestry Commission for a hearing on Title 11 issues in November, and the Noise Review Board for a hearing on noise Title 18 issues in November as well. And then the next slide. So what the packet contains are multiple zoning code chapters that have minor and technical changes to correct code references, as I mentioned before, syncing up the regulations with the new array of zones that we have. We have amendments that occur throughout to provide consistency with new zones. So where we made changes in base zones, we were trying to sync things up. A lot of the regulations and changes pertaining to Title 33 are designed to implement and integrate the inclusionary housing provisions into not only the base zones where they occur, but also multiple plan districts. And I followed this with a recap that was pretty lengthy of many significant amendments that have development implications or implications on policy. I'm not going to walk through that in the interest of time, but I'll mention that we have changes to multiple base zones, including Chapter 33-130, which is commercial mixed use, employment and industrial zones, multi-dwelling zones, and the campus institutional. All of those base zones have been changed to some degree. We had changes in supplemental development regulations, including changes to self-service storage. So that was a topic that you've heard about tonight. The buffer overlay zone, which you've heard about significantly tonight, including removal of that as part of this package, and some offsetting regulations that are added to the employment industrial. I mentioned plan districts earlier. We went through a lengthy discussion of those last time, and we can come back to that if you need to. But we made changes to floor area allowances in many plan districts, and as the commission moves forward on this, we can discuss those in more detail. We also adjusted some language in the conditional use approval criteria, Title 11 trees, as I mentioned earlier, and Title 32 signs. I want to mention that staff has submitted a memo tonight that has a few extra bonus staff proposed amendments here. These are pretty minor and pretty technical. I won't walk through all of them now. I do have copies up in the front for anybody who is here to testify and may be interested in them. And we can talk about those in more detail at your request after we hear some testimony. And then I also want to remind the commission that we did hear at the briefing a number of issues and concerns that you all brought up. I detailed 8 of them. I didn't detail 8 of them. I mentioned 8 of them in my memo to you from a few days ago. And we have prepared a kind of a work session, a memo to kind of walk through some of those in addition to whatever topics you hear about tonight and want to address. So given the lateness of the hour, I want to go ahead and get to testimony, and then we'll figure out what the next steps are.
Okay, thank you very much, Barry. So I will ask the same question of the commission. Does anyone have an actual or potential conflict of interest with regard to this project?
Just restating ownership of property, commercial property in the Mississippi area.
All right, thank you. So we will begin with 2 colleagues from the Urban Forestry Commission, Commissioner Newberry and Commissioner Michelle.
Thank you, everyone, for holding this meeting for us. My name is Catherine Muschel. I live at 6319 Southeast 34th Avenue, and I'm here to make the voice of the Urban Forestry Commission count. I know you already have the commission's letter, which was framed by our policy committee and approved by the entire commission. My role this evening is to add public commentary to that. So I'd like to begin my testimony by asking whether everyone remembers the 2 acts passed by Congress in 1964. So it was the Civil Rights Act and the Wilderness Act. And I wonder if this was a moment that calcified the division between those committed to justice from those who were committed to the environment. I don't know myself. But recently, in reading Black Faces, White Spaces, I could see that the Civil Rights Act and the Wilderness Act together might inspire those of us living in cities not to divide our energies between the cause of green infrastructure from the cause of a just society, but rather to unite those causes and ensure that all the people in the city have access to trees where they work and live. We know from scientific data that trees in the city are now linked with higher birth weights, less pain medication after surgery, lower crime rates when trees are large, lower automobile speed rates, and higher property values. We know that with human health, prevention saves lives and supports quality of life and saves money. We know our health is inextricably linked to ecosystem health. We know that trees filter our water and our air and reduce the lethal heat that builds up on our streets every summer. We know, whatever our place of origin, that trees are crucial to our sense of place and well-being in that place. Knowing all of this, we can easily see why urban forestry partners and such as Friends of Trees and sister bureaus such as the Bureau of Environmental Services have focused planting efforts in residential zones characterized by low canopy and by residents who have been marginalized because of race and income. With the support of Title XI, everyone is working to add and improve canopy in residential zones in outer southeast and northeast to make sure everyone has canopy. But what about where you work and shop? What if you live above the shop? Do you stop breathing while at work? Do you stop breathing because you live in a multifamily affordable housing unit on a busy street? To quote the mission statement from the Urban Green Spaces Institute, the Urban Forestry Commission is asking that the Planning and Sustainability Commission promote the integration of urban green infrastructure with the built environment. The Forestry Commission, for us, it means providing green infrastructure in the form of trees in residential, commercial, and mixed-use zones, even while staying alert to future possibilities for canopy in industrial zones. Environmental justice demands no less from us.
Thank you.
Sorry to go over time.
So thank you all for all the incredible amount of time you're volunteering on this commission, and thank you to Barry, who has come to the Urban Forestry Commission and committees twice to talk in the past few months to talk about the comp plan and rezoning. My name is Daniel Newberry. I live at 13338 Southeast Cora Street in the Powellhurst-Gilbert neighborhood. I'm also a member of the Urban Forestry Commission. And just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to voice my concerns about issues in the current draft of the 2035 Comprehensive Plan Code Reconciliation Project. Though I express my views here, I think you'll find in the letter you got recently that what I'm saying is pretty much in line with what the Urban Forestry Commission has been saying. The new code in the 2035 comp plan will affect the livability of Portland for the next generation. So I think it's incumbent upon us to provide a city that takes into account health and the well-being of all residents. And we know from numerous studies, some of which my fellow commissioner talked about, how specifically a person's health is intertwined with the presence of trees in and around the area where they live. The more land we exempt from tree canopy density requirements, I think the more we condemn the nearby residents to inferior health. And I just ask, where do the poorer residents, the people of color, live in Portland? They live on the east side of the river, by and large. And where are the majority of the low canopy neighborhoods? Also on the east side of the river. The 2035 comp plan extends an exemption for lots with greater than 85% development from tree preservation and landscaping requirements. And then I have to ask, where is the density of exempt and potentially exempt lots, primarily commercial ones, on the east side of the river? So I would like to urge you to remove a specific code exemption in Title XI, that's section 11.50.040, This particular code section in its current form has the effect of valuing the maximization of retail space above neighborhood health and livability. And I got to ask, isn't it more important to have shade where you walk and shop than to have a few more square feet of retail space, especially on a hot day in our changing climate? I encourage members of the Planning and Sustainability Commission to promote removing all exemptions from the 2035 comp plan that exempt commercial and industrial lots from landscaping and tree canopy density and tree planting requirements. More than anything else, I think this is really an equity issue. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Houck, we couldn't quite maintain an internet connection too, but I know he had previously stated support for your letter. So if he were here, I'm sure he would say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will again be calling people up 3 at a time. You will have 2 minutes, and the first 3 are Milton Jones, Doug Klotz, and Micah Mescal. They will be followed by Annette Riz-Kelman, Shukamet Lotate, and Ryan Cruz. Milton, go ahead.
Thank you. Milton Jones from Homestead Neighborhood, again on Markham Hill, and again on parking. First thing I want to do is I want to thank your staff, Joan Fredrickson in particular, for helping us wrestle with issues on Markham Hill. Markham Hill is kind of a unique place in Portland, and it's a very difficult situation to get a handle around, just because, if for no other reason, because of topographic and access issues. I'm here to support your staff recommendation that if you approve a CM2 zone on top of the hill for the commercial development, that would be an up zone, that you also approve the staff recommendation to include that area within the Markham Hill Plan District boundaries. The reason for that is, with a CM2 zone, there is the opportunity for developers to develop commuter commercial parking on the hill. And doing that directly across the street from OHSU, there's no doubt that there is a demand for that parking, but it would enable the developers to circumvent the current parking cap, which is imposed on OHSU. I mean, if there's going to be parking developed up there for OHSU commuters, OHSU would like to do it. To have them go across the street and park in circumvention of parking cap really makes no sense. So your staff has recommended bringing the commercial area within the Markham Hill Plan District boundaries in order to have that same parking cap applied to those commercial zones. It's a little cumbersome, but this seems to be the only way to do it under the code. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Doug. My name is Doug Klotz. 2 things. I'm going to talk about self-storage. I think that the transfer over in the proposal does not quite get it right. CM3 is not where we should be having self-storage. I mean, maybe CX was, but CM3 is not. So I would eliminate CM3 and put restrictions on CE. This has become apparent on Powell at 62nd, where there's a large development storage unit building going in there that does not help that neighborhood turn into something other than a highway. So limitations on CM3. The South Tabor neighborhood nearby to me has come up with a very good letter that lists all options that the commission could do, including from eliminating it in CE down to restricting it, having ground floor window standards, et cetera. So I would urge you to look at the South Tabor neighborhood letter on that. Second thing I want to talk about is a Title 11, and I did not realize that the Forestry Commission was actually talking about removing the 85% exemption, as well as leaving out those specific zones from exemption. I have been an advocate for street trees for a long time, as my friends at the Forestry Commission will tell you. But I believe that especially along corridors where we have not successfully gotten wider commercial corridors, we're crammed in there. We can only do apartments, mixed use, and apartments all just along this narrow corridor through the city. That's the place where we need to get in as much residential use as possible. The street trees on those corridors, if we can get big street trees on those corridors, and then you get 100 feet away, you get the next zone, which might be R1, might be R25, and those are allowed trees too. I think we do need to exempt CM2 and CM3 in those areas and work on getting big trees in the right of way.
Thank you.
My name is Micah Meskel, and I'm representing the Audubon Society of Portland. Thanks for having us here today to testify. Our comments are pertaining to the Tree Code Title 11. We strongly agree with the staff recommendation to amend the code to eliminate reference to exemptions for CS and CM zones for the tree preservation standards of Title 11. We urge Planning and Sustainability Commission to retain this recommendation and to go further and consider eliminating Title 11 exemptions from the remaining commercial and industrial zones. The City of Portland's Title 11 was developed and adopted in 2009 and 10 after the collapse of the housing market. At the time of adoption, Title 11 was an improvement over the previous code, but temporary exemptions were put in place for all industrial and commercially zoned lands until a more complete data analysis could be completed, which severely narrowed the application of the tree code. Now that this data gap has been remediated, it is time to remove these exemptions and implement Title 11 on the entire city as it was intended. We think this is a great process or a plan to start that process. Since Title 11 was adopted, several long-range planning processes have prioritized the expansion of green infrastructure for both human and public health, including the Comprehensive Plan and the Climate Action Plan. These plans note the deficiency of urban tree canopy in commercial and industrial zones and how this deficiency has created some of the worst urban heat islands in the city, oftentimes negatively affecting low-income communities that are located nearby. Removing Title 11 exemptions for all commercial and industrial zones provides a great opportunity to improve these deficiencies and work towards a wide range of community health goals. Given all we know about the importance of trees, including their ability to mitigate urban heat island effect and improve air quality, it is time that commercial and industrial zoned lands play their role in improving the environment and human health of our communities. Please remove the exemptions for all commercial and industrial zone lands in the city so that the tree code can be implemented across the city as it was intended. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff?
Quick question. I know it's late, gentlemen in the Audubon. So did I understand there's been some analysis of, you said something about these are the worst heat island effect areas in the city. Is there a study that quantifies or measures heat island effect? And do we have a map that shows where these worst areas are in the city?
Yeah, so both PSU and the urban forest, I believe the urban forestry through Parks Bureau have come up with analysis.
So is there a map we can be provided with, Eric? Are you aware of this? Or?
We can get you what the studies that are being referred to, yeah.
Okay, I'd be curious to see the study and the map. Or
Okay.
if you have it, perhaps you could provide to staff if they don't have it.
Yeah, I can connect.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. The next three are Annette Riz-Kelman, Shukamet Latate, Brian Cruz. They will be followed by Ted Labby and Silas Beebe. And if anyone else wants to testify, please get a card to Julie as soon as possible. Please go ahead.
Should I go?
Yes.
My name is Annette Reese-Kelman. The three of us are here from the South Tabor Neighborhood Association, and it's about the letter that was sent to you about the code, about self-service storage. So our whole neighborhood association has been responding to a proposal to build a 143,000 square foot, 900 unit self-service storage facility at Southeast 62nd Avenue in Powell, the old 7Ds place. It's in a CG zone, and we've learned a lot about the conflicts that this use is going to present with adjacent residential zones and the vision for the future development along our transit streets and civic corridors. We want to limit the low activity uses like self-storage for commercial and mixed use zones along these civic corridors and major transit streets, because self-service storage is characterized by extremely low activity levels and employment compared to other uses. And when sited on transit streets, you just get these blank facades, you get a lot of dead zones, you end up with drug trafficking and people living in these units and crime in the neighborhood. We would prefer to have retail and commercial activity, which is needed to bring in services and employment and vitality to our neighborhoods. There are 3 options in this letter. I'm going to talk quickly about option 1, which is the strongest, which we would like, to prohibit self-service storage in the commercial mixed-use zone of CM3. We believe that CM3 is more comparable to the commercial mixed zone use zone CM2 than it is to the current CG or EX. And the differences between the CM2 and CM3 we believe should be about scale and the density of units. We'd also like to prohibit self-storage in CE, like Doug talked about. There are 5 sites that are zoned to be CE along the Southeast Powell, and Southeast Powell is being transformed from a highway with auto-centric to a vibrant civic corridor with frequent transit service and higher
Could wrap
density.
up, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brian Cruz. I also live in South Tabor. So I'm going to read about option 2. While we believe there are good reasons to prohibit self-storage outright in these zones, we want to propose some targeted changes as well that could address the issue differently. We have found that the current self-storage guidelines are not strong enough to prevent the low activity use they were designed to direct away from civic corridors and major transit streets. While requiring that Type 2 design review use the more robust community design guidelines as a step forward, we ask that you also add requirements for self-service storage in C zones. The request is to prohibit self-storage in CM3 and CE on transit streets with frequent service lines. Self-service storage is inappropriate for transit streets. Storage is primarily an auto-dependent use and a poor fit for a major transit street. And then there's a note included here. Should you decide against this option and still allow the use in C zones on transit streets, we ask that you not waive the parking requirements, table 266-2. While this is not ideal from a planning standpoint, if there's going to be an auto-dependent use on a transit street, it should at least be served by parking.
My name is Shulamit Lotate, and thank you for trying to pronounce my name.
I wish I did better.
That's okay. So I'm going to speak about option 3. We ask that you consider other adjustments to make the self-service storage use a better fit within a larger landscape. If you do decide to recommend allowing the use of either CM3 or CE, we would request limits on where self-service storage can be located within the site and how much of the site can be dedicated to that use. The recommendation is to apply the standards of the center's Main Street overlay to self-service storage in CE zones on transit streets with frequent services. This would require additional ground floor uses to activate the street and make better use of the frontage and transit access. For CE zones, it would also respect that zone as place intended for employment, typically with as few as 1 employee on site at any given time. Self-service storage buildings do not generate much employment or transit use. The other recommendation is to limit the size of site where self-service storage can be located and or limit how much of the site can be dedicated to that use. This approach could be drafted similarly to the industrial size limitation for CM3. Quotation, these types of uses are allowed but limited in size to assure that they will not dominate the commercial area and to limit their potential impacts on residential and commercial uses. You could direct self-service storage off the ground floor away from major street frontage and require a mix of retail or office uses. There's more, but I think I'm going to stop here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We do.
Just 10 seconds. I want to thank you guys. That's really great testimony. I really appreciate that you gave us sort of some options on how to approach the problem. So thank you for doing that. I think you'll have a receptive response from this group, I suspect. So thank you.
And we want to thank John Carr, who did this.
Yeah, our two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The last two I have are Ted Labby and Silas Beebe. Anyone else, please submit a card.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Ted Labby. I reside at 3011 Northeast Hoyt Street in the Kearns neighborhood. And tonight I'm representing the Urban Green Spaces Institute. I'm the policy and program director there. And I just want to echo and reiterate what you heard earlier from the Urban Forestry Commission. Encourage you to go forward with eliminating these exemptions on the tree preservation and tree density requirements in the CS and CM zones. Our commercial centers and corridors are among the most tree-deficient areas of the city and represent summer extreme heat hotspots. We know we're losing large form trees in the city. We know we have about half of our planting strips in the city are 3 feet or less, where we just can't grow big trees. We need more urban tree cover in both commercial and industrial areas of the city. So in addition to the CS and CM zones, why not also remove these exemptions from the CX zone and all the industrial zones, like Portland Audubon suggested? I think, again, reiterating the equity aspect of this, using an environmental justice lens, under the new comp plan, we're concentrating new multifamily housing development in our commercial corridors and centers. In these same commercial corridors and centers, we exempt properties from the tree code requirements exactly where we have the most sparse tree cover. How does this represent an equitable access to urban nature in the city? I would ask that question. That's all I have for you tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I've learned that the lot on St. Helens Road is relevant to both sections tonight, and so I would like to ask that we could extend the deadline for public comment until Friday on this, because I guess apparently our lot is relevant to both sections we're discussing tonight. I hope that you guys would not make a decision tonight about the buffer overlay, and give us a chance to get more comments and make an exception for this particular location. I think one of the concerns of the neighbors is that this while there's no proposal now to remove the environmental overlay, this was kind of the first step, and it would fast track towards development later. There is water directly below my house, a little stream, and it's eroded into a little mini canyon, and there's another one below Stu Smucker's house. So there's water this time of year, visible surface water running through the lot, and it's a steep lot, and there's been landslides in the past, so we're a bit concerned about not just the buildability, but the livability of the neighborhood. We do encourage, and we're happy to have the the jobs and the work of the industrial zone next door. And we just would hope to save this one little buffer we have between us and industry, because it's pretty slim. It's, I don't know, somewhere between 50 and 100 feet wide, and I can go get photos so you can see my house directly from St. Helens Road pretty easily. The IG zoning that remains there, if the buffer is removed, the IG allows rail yards, manufacturing, diesel trucks directly next to family houses. And when I say directly next, it's up to 0 feet from the back of a residential lot or 5 feet from the side of a residential lot, depending on the height of the building. And that concerns us. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call. Anyone who would like to testify on the code reconciliation projects? Seeing none, I'm closing the hearing on the code reconciliation projects. Barry, come on back up. So Barry, process-wise, do you have any objection to holding the written record open to 5 p.m. on Friday?
I do not.
Okay, so we will do so. Any thoughts on what we heard, Barry?
I think you've heard quite a bit of testimony. I think the majority of written testimony you've seen and heard tonight was about Title 11, so I think that's an issue that you've already flagged as something you want to have a discussion on. So I think we can work through some of those issues in a work session and see where we land on them. Buffer overlay obviously has been a topic for both the MAP project and the code reconciliation project. I think depending on how the commission wants to move forward, there might be a code solution or a MAP solution. Certainly the code solution was the approach that we took initially, which generated the MAP changes. So we can talk about code solutions, and I think one of the things we might be able to do is explore in more detail at a work session what is being proposed in the employment and industrial zones as an offset to the buffer overlay to see and look at what the differences really are. I'm not sure you want to do that tonight, or if you want to do that.
Yeah, we'll do once around the room for issues, but we're not going to get any deeper into that. A process question I do have, sure. Since there's a lot of overlap we've heard between what you're doing and what Marty's doing, how are we going to process that in work session in terms of where the overlap is? Do we consider it in one or consider it the other? How are we going to do traffic control around that?
Maybe Marty and I need to have a little bit of a conversation about that first. My thought is the buffer overlay issues that you probably heard about in testimony on the MAP project are really driven by the code project. So there's a relationship there. I think some of the testimony you heard about the self-service storage, might be the other way around, but we have the ability to maybe look at the code pieces of that. But Marty and I can have some conversations.
Okay, but
about it
then
as well.
Where Marty is remapping to RH, you're going to have to record whether it's 2-to-1 or FAR, 4-to-1 FAR, right? So.
Correct. And we'll definitely address that issue. I mean, if the commission decides one way or another in terms of the FAR allowances on those RH properties or any of the other zoning pieces, that whether it's a commercial mixed use or something else, we can make the appropriate adjustments here. I think just sequencing, let me talk to Marty about that. There's a couple of tricks
We
there,
can certainly choreograph
Right.
the timing of your final recommendations so that they happen at the same time, whether or not regardless of how you allocate your time at the work sessions, we can.
Just wondering if for some set of issues we need a combined work session where we kind of have both sets of things open at once, but we'll let you and Marty figure that out. Okay. So to the commission, you'll have the same deadline for comments on this, 5 p.m. on Tuesday. So let's go around the room. We'll reverse order. So Eli, let's start with you.
Sure. Thank you. I have, I guess, two items. One is I'd like to see a little more information on the commercial residential zoning and employment that we discussed a while ago. While we were actually at the commission meeting a couple weeks ago, I received a voicemail message from a woman trying to figure out if she could do a pediatric office, where she could find a house that she could put that in. And I realized that that might be the case in point for people trying to do something that would exceed what's allowed under a home business use, where she would have a couple employees and probably about 8 trips a day. So she couldn't do it under the residential zone, but would like to have an opportunity in a commercial zone within the same form of a house, and that it might be neighborhood acceptable. That said, I also talked to a land use consultant and learned that the difference between doing a comp plan plus zone change is not that much more work than doing just a zone change. And in either of those processes, the city would be looking at the possibility of a 7-Eleven locating there at some point in the future. So I'm not sure this belongs in this code update. I'm sort of stepping back a little bit from that now, but I would like to see if there's a way that we can further our opportunities to have home-based businesses beyond what we have today. The other topic I have on is the tree code, which I hope that when we have a discussion, we can have PBOT and forestry attending, both with full-height chairs. Sometimes it feels like forestry gets like a little kid chair at the table in terms of right-of-way discussions, because I think especially in the mixed-use zones, the 3-foot width of many planting strips is the true culprit. And I'd like to extend I'd like to have a Title 11 apply citywide, but I feel like in some of the mixed-use zones, really the solution to have those is to have those large trees in the right of way. That's the way other cities tend to do it, which provides a visual buffer to the building next to it that may be almost full site coverage. So my hope is that even though in this code update we're just talking about what happens on the private side, I hope that we have a chance to learn how we might be able to steer the conversation on the public side of the line to achieve the tree canopy we're seeking in the right of way.
Thank you, Dwight. Teresa?
So I think you covered, we have tree code in our list of things to talk about. One thing that occurs to me with the self-storage conversation is it's very clear why self-storage is not visually appealing to a neighborhood. But on the equity side, do we know who is using these self-storage units? We're doing a couple things. We're trying to reduce the physical size of homes. We have a bunch of homeless people, and I can imagine if I went homeless, I would want to put all my furniture in a self-storage place that I could get to via the bus so I could go look at it and hope I could find a house someday to put it back into. So maybe this is really not a concern, but I would just, if we could just do a little bit of research on why we're seeing this demand and where it's being uptake.
Andres?
I really appreciated the conversation from the forestry folks about the relationship between environmentalism and tree activism and civil rights. I don't know how much it pertains to the current conversation, but I guess it got me thinking about the role the city plays with regulations, and I think that Portland has become very comfortable with sustainability, and we are willing to take on sustainability initiatives that could have financial implications for property owners. And I think that's important. But I feel like we have a hesitation when it comes to doing the same thing for people as we enter conversations around affordable housing. And so I'd like to see more parity around the willingness we have to shape the market when we decide to do sustainability initiatives versus when we do initiatives for people in housing. And I guess that's my contribution right now.
Thank you. Katie?
Oh, I don't have much more to add. I think that I hope you were listening when I talked before, because I think that in my own mind, it's been hard to separate the two projects. But the other, some of the newer testimony, one of the things is that everyone's saying that they want, some of the testimony was that they want commercial and industrial to not be exempt. And so I'm a little bit curious whether it would make sense to do commercial but not industrial, or there's differences between commercial and industrial.
With respect to
the
excuse me,
trees.
Title 11 issues, right? Okay.
Thank you, Chris. The only additional issue I'd add, and I haven't looked at your latest memo because we did talk about this, at least in executive session, is a concern, and the chair, Kat Schultz, has raised this, is, I'm trying to articulate it, but it has to do with not just affordable housing, but our goal to be sure we're not limiting FAR and density in a way that undermines our density and supply of housing goals. Mm-hmm. It first arises, of course, in the inclusionary zoning context. We're now trying to figure out what changes we need to make in the mostly the mixed-use zones. But also, and I didn't get a chance to follow up, but I think Barry Smith, an architect, talked about have we miszoned areas? And I realize that's a little bit beyond the scope of this project, but I think it's just an ongoing concern that should be addressed whenever we're looking at code is, are we undermining the density we hope to achieve, mostly in our mixed-use zones, I'm thinking about, and particularly on main streets, corridors, transit streets, by making it difficult to get additional FAR, by making it difficult to get additional density, and at the same time not even gaining any inclusionary zoning because the market won't allow it. that was a little bit convoluted. But we just had this discussion. I'm not sure what the product is, Barry, but I think we've kicked this around a little bit, so hopefully you can keep thinking about it, and maybe as a first step, it's some minor tweaks to the amount of FAR we're offering in some of these areas you're revisiting. Is that?
And I certainly can, and I think in our work session memo, which I didn't share with you, and we can talk about in the next session, or I can get to you in advance to chew on, we can outline, areas where we think, FAR might be more constrained than other areas. For the most part, we've added components to offset for IH, and we can talk about how we came to the conclusions about what we're proposing there as well, and then we can have some discussion on that.
I keep hearing anecdotally, and again, we heard from an architect tonight, that they can't make projects work, that there's simply not enough FAR and density bonus available to make a project work. I don't know how real that anecdotal concern is, but we're hearing it enough, and I think we don't want to wake up in 5 or 10 years and find we've underbuilt in these mixed-use zones. So go solve this problem.
I wasn't here for that earlier testimony, but so maybe I can listen to the tape and kind of get a little bit of sense of that. But
he didn't give a lot of specifics, unfortunately.
Okay,
and I decided not to pin him down.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I'll just add a few. On the self-storage issue, I think having self-storage on civic corridors and major transit corridors does not seem consistent with our overall policies. So very interested in examining that. I think the equity angle on who's using it is interesting. I would wonder if there is a sustainability angle on that. I kind of wonder what the embodied greenhouse gases and all those things shoved in storage lockers is, and the need for a sharing economy where you can access stuff without having to own it could be a lot more efficient from a sustainability point of view. Barry, you and I have corresponded on the level of service question in the transportation approvals code that appears several dozen times, and I think we're getting closer, but not quite there yet. So we'll keep working on that. And I think the testimony at Markham Hill and the parking policy there, whether that's addressable in the code as opposed to the map, I think that'll be one of the areas for you and Marty to explore. I think that's it for me.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess just in my summary here, I think most of what we have on our list is captured. I think the self-service storage is a new issue that we probably want to talk about in more detail. And I think Andre's comments about sustainability and the parity between how we view regulations, I might want to follow up and have a follow-up conversation on that. But I think other than that, most of the issues that we've highlighted have been captured. So look forward to talking to you on November 14th, I believe, is our next meeting on this one.
Okay.